I stared at the name tag in my trembling hands, the disappointment. At my own father's 60th birthday party, surrounded by his colleagues and our extended family, this was how he chose to introduce me. My stepmother Patricia's cruel laughter echoed through the country club's grand ballroom. "Well, it's true," she announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. That's when something inside me finally snapped. 28 years of being the family scapegoat was about to end, and they had no idea what was coming. The morning had started with such misplaced optimism. I'd driven 2 hours from my modest apartment in the city, telling myself that maybe this time would be different. Maybe Dad would actually acknowledge my existence without that familiar look of disdain crossing his features. The Riverside Country Club stood majestically against the October sky, its manicured lawns and pristine white columns screaming old money and exclusivity. This was my father's world, one where appearances mattered more than truth, where reputation trumped family bonds. I arrived 30 minutes early, parking my 10-year-old Honda Civic between a gleaming Mercedes and a brand new Tesla. The valet's subtle smirk didn't escape my notice as I handed over my keys. Inside, the ballroom was already transforming into what Patricia had described in her countless planning emails as an elegant celebration befitting Richard's stature. Norma, finally. Patricia's voice cut through the ambient classical music. She glided toward me in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her perfectly styled blonde hair not daring to move out of place. "I was beginning to wonder if you'd forgotten." "I said I'd be here early to help," I reminded her, forcing a smile that felt like broken glass in my mouth. She looked me up and down her lips, pursing at my simple black dress. "Yes, well, you can start by helping arrange the floral centerpieces. The professional decorators have done the important work, but someone needs to place the small bouquets on the cocktail tables." Of course. Even when I volunteered to help, I was relegated to the tasks deemed beneath the hired staff. I bit back my response and headed toward the boxes of flowers near the service entrance. As I worked, I watched the transformation of the space. Ice sculptures were wheeled and a champagne fountain was assembled, and an elaborate photo display chronicled my father's life achievements. "Emma, darling, you look absolutely stunning." Patricia's voice rang out with genuine warmth, a tone I'd never once heard directed at me. I turned to see my half-sister sweep into the room, her red cocktail dress hugging her figure perfectly, her smile radiant with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted their place in the world. At 25, Emma was everything our father wanted in a daughter, beautiful, successful, and most importantly, his biological child with Patricia. "Mom, the partners from Dad's firm are already arriving. Should I go greet them?" Emma asked, completely ignoring my presence, despite standing just 15 feet away. "That would be wonderful, sweetheart. Make sure to mention your recent promotion. Your father is so proud that you're following in his footsteps." The promotion. I'd heard about it endlessly for the past month. Emma, with barely 2 years of experience, had somehow leapfrogged over associates who'd been at the firm for 5 or 6 years. But of course, being Richard Brennan's daughter opened doors that remained firmly shut for others. I focused on the flowers, each arrangement requiring more concentration than necessary. The roses were perfect, not a single blemish on their velvet petals. Such a stark contrast to how I felt standing in this room where every corner held a memory of being overlooked, dismissed, or actively pushed aside. "Excuse me, miss, could you help us with something?" An older woman in catering attire approached me hesitantly. "Of course," I replied, grateful for any distraction. Mrs. Brennan gave us specific instructions about the seating arrangements, but this chart seems unusual. She showed me the clipboard and I scanned the carefully drawn diagram. Table 1. Richard, Patricia, Emma, and Richard's law partners. Table 2. Patricia's country club friends and their spouses. Table 3 through 11. Various associates' clients and extended family. Table 12, Norma Brennan. Table 12 was in the far corner, partially hidden behind a decorative screen that sectioned off the service area. A single seat at an otherwise empty table. "Is this correct?" the caterer asked, her voice carrying a note of confusion. "A table for one." My cheeks burned with humiliation. "I'll speak with Mrs. Brennan about it." But I didn't need to ask. This was Patricia's way of solving the problem of my presence. Invite me to avoid questions from family members who still remembered my mother, but ensure I remained invisible throughout the celebration. I handed back the clipboard. "Yes, it's correct." The caterer's expression shifted to one of pity, which somehow felt worse than the isolation itself. I returned to my flowers, blinking rapidly to dispel the moisture gathering in my eyes. "Oh, Norma's helping with the flowers. How sweet." Emma had materialized beside me, her tone dripping with condescension. "Though I'm surprised you could make it. Dad mentioned you've been struggling with what do you call it? Your consulting business." "It's forensic accounting," I corrected quietly. "And it's going well, actually." Emma laughed, a tinkling sound that reminded me of breaking china. "If you say so, though Dad says you've been having trouble making rent again. You know, if you need money, you could always just ask instead of pretending to have a career." The irony of her statement almost made me laugh. Emma had no idea that my struggling business had recently landed a major contract investigating financial fraud for a Fortune 500 company. But I'd learned long ago that defending myself in this family was pointless. "I should finish these arrangements," I said, turning back to the roses. "You do that," Emma replied, already walking away. "Oh, and Norma, try to smile during the party. We don't want Dad's important guests thinking there's family drama." As she left, I noticed something on the side table near the entrance. Dozens of name tags were laid out in neat rows, each with a guest's name printed in elegant calligraphy. I walked over, running my finger along the tags until I found mine. But it wasn't just my name. Where every other tag simply stated the guest's name, mine read, "Norma Brennan, the Disappointment." My hands trembled as I picked it up, staring at the cruel label. This wasn't a mistake or a sick joke by Patricia. The calligraphy was too perfect, the formatting too deliberate. This had been ordered, approved, and paid for. I looked around the room at the photo display that showcased my father's life. Baby pictures of Emma photos from family vacations I wasn't invited, to images of Dad receiving various awards and honors. I appeared in exactly none of them past age 10, as if I'd simply ceased to exist after my mother's death. The name tag felt heavy in my palm, its weight far exceeding the small piece of cardstock. This was how they saw me. Not as a daughter or sister, but as a label, a role to play in their perfect family narrative. The disappointment, the failure, the reminder of my father's first marriage and the woman he'd lost. I slipped the tag into my purse, not yet ready to pin it to my dress, but I knew I would. I'd wear their label one last time, play the role they'd assigned me for 28 years. Because tonight, everything was going to change. The cocktail hour began at precisely 6 o'clock, and the ballroom filled with the city's legal elite. I stood near the bar, the offensive name tag now pinned to my dress, like a scarlet letter, watching as guests did double takes when they read it. Some laughed nervously, others looked away in discomfort, but no one said anything directly to me. That was the power of the Brennan name. People would witness cruelty, but never challenge it. I ordered a glass of white wine, needing something to hold more than something to drink. The bartender, a young man who couldn't have been older than 22, read my name tag and winced. "Rough night?" he asked quietly, pouring my drink. "You could say that," I replied, managing a weak smile. Across the room, my father held court, surrounded by partners from his firm. Richard Brennan, at 60, was still an imposing figure. Tall, distinguished, with silver hair that suggested wisdom rather than age. He commanded attention effortlessly, his booming laugh carrying over the jazz quartet's soft melodies. Norma Brennan. I turned to find Harold Westbrook approaching a tumbler of whiskey, already half empty in his hand. Harold had been my father's law partner for over 30 years, and from the slight sway in his step, this wasn't his first drink of the evening. "Hello, Mr. Westbrook," I said politely. "Harold, please. We've known each other since you were in pigtails." His eyes fell to my name tag and his jovial expression faltered. "What in the... Is this someone's idea of a joke?" "Something like that," I murmured, taking a sip of wine. Harold shook his head, muttering something under his breath. "Your father always did have an unusual sense of humor, though between you and me, I never found it particularly funny." We stood in awkward silence for a moment before Harold seemed to remember something. "You know, I was just telling someone the other day about how generous Richard has been with Emma, setting up her trust fund now that she's 25. Smart move, really. The tax benefits alone are substantial." My wine glass paused halfway to my lips. "Her trust fund?" "Oh, yes. Quite a substantial one, though I suppose it's only fair considering what he did for you when you turned 25. Harold chuckled, taking another drink. "Though I must say I was surprised when Richard told us you'd refused yours. Very principled of you wanting to make it on your own without family money." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "He told you I refused it." Harold's eyebrows drew together. "Well, yes. 3 years ago, wasn't it? Richard said you gave quite a speech about independence and not wanting to rely on trust funds. He seemed quite proud of your decision, actually, said it showed character." I started, then stopped. The truth was crystallizing in my mind like ice forming on a window. "Harold, I never refused any trust fund. I wasn't even aware one existed." The older man's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, realization, and then a desperate attempt to backtrack. "I must be mistaken. Perhaps I'm thinking of someone else." "No, you're not," I said quietly. "What exactly did my father tell you?" Harold glanced around nervously, clearly regretting his loose tongue. "Norma, I've had a few drinks. I'm probably confusing details." "Please," I pressed, "I need to know." He sighed deeply, the weight of 3 decades of professional discretion warring with basic human decency. Finally, he leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Your mother's will established equal trust funds for any children from her marriage to Richard. When Emma turned 25 last year, Richard activated hers. $500,000 properly invested. When I asked about yours, he said you'd formally declined it." $500,000! The number echoed in my head, bouncing off the walls of every financial struggle I'd faced in the past 3 years. The student loans I was still paying off, the months I'd survived on ramen noodles while building my business, the humiliation of having my credit card declined at a client dinner. "Did he have to present any documentation of my refusal?" I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Harold shifted uncomfortably. Richard's word was enough. He is managing partner after all. Of course it was. In my father's world, his word was law, unquestioned and absolute. But something else was bothering me about Harold's revelation. "You said Emma's trust fund was activated last year," I said slowly, "but you mentioned the tax benefits. Wouldn't those be more advantageous if the funds were used for a major purchase?" Harold's face went pale. He suddenly seemed much more sober. "I shouldn't have said anything. Please, Norma, forget we had this conversation." "A purchase like Patricia's beach house in the Hamptons." I continued, pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known existed suddenly falling into place. "The one she bought last spring that must have cost at least $480,000, Harold whispered, looking like he might be sick. "Norma, you can't prove anything. These are serious accusations." "I'm not accusing anyone of anything," I said calmly. "I'm just observing that my stepmother bought a beach house worth almost exactly the amount of my trust fund, right around the time that my father told everyone I'd refused it." Harold drained the rest of his whiskey in one gulp. "I need another drink. And Norma, be careful. Your father, he doesn't take kindly to questions about family finances." As Harold hurried away, I stood alone in the crowded room, my mind racing. This wasn't just about favoritism or emotional neglect anymore. This was theft. My father had stolen my inheritance and used it to buy his trophy wife a beach house. I thought about all the times Patricia had complained about the house's upkeep in front of me, lamenting the cost of pool maintenance and property taxes. She'd been living in a house paid for with my money while I struggled to make rent on a studio apartment. "There you are," Patricia's shrill voice cut through my thoughts. "Why aren't you at your table? Dinner service is about to begin." I turned to face her, seeing her differently now. The designer dress, the jewelry, the subtle cosmetic procedures that kept her looking 40 at 55, all of it funded by my father's deceptions. "Just mingling," I said, marveling at my own composure. Patricia's eyes narrowed at my tone. "Well, mingle your way to table 12. We can't have you hovering around the important guests all evening." "Of course not," I agreed. "Wouldn't want anyone to think I actually belong here." She missed the sarcasm entirely, nodding approvingly. "Exactly. Now hurry along." As I walked toward my exile in the corner, I caught sight of my reflection in one of the ballroom's mirrors. The woman staring back at me wore a name tag declaring her the disappointment. But her eyes held something new, not hurt or resignation, but determination. They'd stolen more than money from me. They'd stolen my birthright, my mother's final gift, my financial security, and they'd done it while painting me as too proud to accept help. I took my seat at the empty table, placed my napkin in my lap, and began to plan. Harold was wrong about one thing. I didn't need to prove anything, because I had something better than proof. I had patience. And after 28 years of being underestimated, I knew exactly how to use it. The dinner service began with practiced elegance, waiters gliding between tables with choreographed precision. From my isolated corner, I had a perfect view of the main table where my father sat, like a king among his courtiers. Patricia hung on his every word. Emma laughed at all the right moments, and the law partners nodded along to whatever wisdom he was dispensing between courses. My own dinner arrived, the vegetarian option I hadn't requested but had apparently been assigned. Another small slight, another reminder that my preferences didn't matter. I ate mechanically, using the time to observe and plan. The speeches began during dessert. Patricia stood first, tapping her champagne flute with a silver spoon until the room fell silent. "Thank you all for joining us to celebrate Richard's 60th birthday." She began, her voice carrying the practiced sweetness of someone who'd taken elocution lessons. When I met Richard 15 years ago, I knew immediately that he was a man of extraordinary character, a devoted father, a brilliant attorney, and the love of my life. I watched my father beam at her words, his hand reaching up to squeeze hers. 15 years ago. I'd been 13, still reeling from my mother's death 3 years earlier. Patricia had appeared in our lives like a whirlwind, all sympathy and promises of being a friend rather than a replacement. Those promises had evaporated the moment she'd secured her wedding ring. "Richard has built an empire through sheer determination and integrity," Patricia continued. "He's shown us all what it means to succeed without compromising your values." Without compromising values. I thought of Harold's revelation about my stolen trust fund and almost laughed at the irony. Patricia's speech continued for another 5 minutes, each word carefully crafted to reinforce the image of Richard Brennan as a paragon of virtue. When she finally sat down, the room erupted in polite applause. Emma stood next her, movements graceful and confident. "Dad," she began, her voice carrying just the right amount of emotion. "You've been my hero since the day I was born. Every achievement in my life has been possible because of your guidance and support." She paused, dabbing at her eyes with theatrical precision. "When I started at the firm, people said I'd have to work twice as hard to prove myself because I was the boss's daughter. But you taught me that Brennans don't make excuses. We make success happen. My recent promotion isn't about nepotism. It's about living up to the standards you set." The room murmured appreciatively. I noticed several of the younger associates from the firm exchanging glances, but none dared to challenge the narrative. Emma was selling her promotion as merit-based, and everyone was buying it. To the best father a daughter could ask for, Emma concluded, raising her glass. Happy 60th birthday, Dad. More applause, more champagne toasting. I remained still at my corner table, my untouched dessert congealing on the plate before me. Richard's brother went next, regaling the room with childhood stories that painted my father as destined for greatness from birth. Then came testimonials from law partners, each one more effusive than the last. The Richard Brennan they described bore little resemblance to the man who told his colleagues I'd refused my inheritance while using it to fund his wife's real estate dreams. Finally, my father himself stood commanding instant attention. At 60, he still cut an impressive figure in his tailored suit, his presence filling the room effortlessly. Thank you all for being here tonight. He began, his voice carrying the authority of countless courtroom victories. As I stand here surrounded by family, friends, and colleagues, I'm reminded that success isn't measured in verdicts won or deals closed. It's measured in the legacy we leave behind. He paused for effect, his eyes scanning the room. I've been blessed with a wonderful wife who makes every day brighter and a daughter who's following in my footsteps with distinction. Emma's recent promotion, earned entirely on her own merits, fills me with more pride than any case I've ever won. Earned entirely on her own merits. The lies flowed so smoothly, I wondered if he even recognized them as falsehoods anymore. Of course, he continued, and I saw his eyes find me in my corner, every family has its challenges. Not everyone can rise to meet expectations, but that's what makes success meaningful. Not everyone achieves it. A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the room. I felt heat rise in my cheeks as his meaning became clear. He was using his birthday speech to take shots at me to reinforce my role as the family failure. Some people, he went on, his gaze still fixed on me, prefer to blame others for their shortcomings. They refuse opportunities, reject help, and then wonder why success eludes them. But I've learned you can't help those who won't help themselves. Refuse opportunities, reject help. He was laying the groundwork for his lies about my trust fund, painting me as too proud or too stupid to accept what was offered. The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. That's why I'm so grateful for Patricia and Emma, he said, turning back to his audience. They understand that success requires dedication, sacrifice, and the wisdom to accept guidance when it's offered. He paused again, and I saw the slight smirk playing at his lips. He was enjoying this, enjoying the way I sat alone at my distant table wearing my humiliating name tag, forced to listen to him rewrite history. But tonight isn't about dwelling on disappointments, he said, and I heard scattered laughter as people caught the reference to my name tag. Tonight is about celebrating achievements, about recognizing that some people are simply meant for greatness while others... He shrugged eloquently, letting the implication hang in the air. Others were meant to be disappointments. Others were meant to sit at empty tables in corners wearing their failures like name tags. Every family needs someone to keep expectations in perspective, he concluded, raising his glass in my direction, to remind us what happens when you lack the drive to succeed. So here's to family, in all its forms. The room erupted in applause and laughter. People were actually laughing at his cruel joke, at the way he'd used his birthday speech to humiliate his own daughter. I saw a few guests glance at me with pity, but no one spoke up. No one challenged the narrative. Patricia stood again, clapping enthusiastically. Beautifully said, darling. Now I think we should hear from everyone. Even family disappointments deserve their moment, don't they? She was looking directly at me, her smile sharp as a blade. The room turned to follow her gaze, dozens of eyes finding me in my corner. Some were curious, others uncomfortable, but all were waiting. Norma, Patricia called out with false cheer. Surely you'd like to say something for your father's birthday after all he's given you so much over the years? Given me so much, like a name tag calling me a disappointment, like lies about refusing my inheritance, like a seat at an empty table while my trust fund paid for her beach house. I felt my hands tremble slightly as I reached for my champagne glass. The room was waiting, expecting me to either shrink into nothing or offer some stammering, pathetic attempt at a toast that they could mock later. They had no idea what was coming. I stood slowly, my movements deliberate. The champagne flute felt cool in my hand as I tapped it gently with my dessert spoon. The delicate chime cut through the murmuring crowd, commanding attention. I'd like to make a toast, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. I saw Patricia's satisfied smirk, Emma's eye roll my father's expectant sneer. They thought they knew what was coming, the disappointment playing her assigned role one last time. They thought wrong. But first, I said, letting my words hang in the air, I need to use the ladies' room. Please hold that thought. The anticlimax caused a ripple of confusion through the crowd. Patricia's face showed irritation at being denied her moment of triumph, while my father simply looked amused. Let the disappointment run away, his expression seemed to say. It's what she does best. I set down my champagne glass carefully and walked through the ballroom with my head held high, ignoring the whispers that followed in my wake. My hands were steady now, my purpose clear. Sometimes the best revenge required perfect timing. The bathroom was mercifully empty when I entered, all the guests being seated for the speeches. I gripped the marble countertop and stared at my reflection. The woman wearing the disappointment on her chest like a badge of shame. But my eyes told a different story. They burned with years of suppressed truth ready to finally ignite. The bathroom door opened, and I expected to see Patricia coming to gloat or Emma arriving to mock. Instead, an elderly man entered, then stopped abruptly. "Oh, I'm terribly sorry, I must have—" He paused, squinting at me. Norma Brennan." I recognized him then, though age had added lines to his face and silver to what remained of his hair. Dr. Stephen Martin, our family physician from my childhood. He'd retired 5 years ago, moving to Florida, last I'd heard. "Dr. Martin," I said, genuinely surprised. "I didn't know you were back in town." "Just visiting for the week. Your father invited me to his celebration." He studied me with the careful attention of a man who'd spent decades reading symptoms in faces. "I must say I'm surprised to see you here, and walking so well, no less." My confusion must have shown because he continued, "Your father told me your condition had deteriorated significantly. When I saw him at the golf club last year, he mentioned you were having mobility issues. Progressive muscle weakness, wasn't it?" The bathroom suddenly felt too small. "I'm sorry, what condition?" Dr. Martin's face went through several expressions: confusion, concern, and finally a dawning realization that he'd said something he shouldn't have. Perhaps I misunderstood," he said carefully. "No," I said, my voice sharp. "Please, what exactly did my father tell you about my health?" The elderly doctor sighed suddenly, looking every one of his 70-plus years. "Norma, I treated you from birth until I retired. You were always healthy as a horse. So when your father started telling people about your degenerative condition, I assumed it had developed after I left practice." "Degenerative condition," I repeated flatly. "What else did he say?" Dr. Martin moved to the sink, washing his hands unnecessarily, clearly buying time to think. "He said you were struggling with a neurological disorder, that it affected your judgment and decision-making. He even asked me in confidence about the process for medical power of attorney." The room spun slightly. I gripped the counter harder. He was quite concerned. Dr. Martin continued, not meeting my eyes. "Said you were refusing treatment, making poor financial decisions. He worried about your ability to care for yourself long-term." When was this? My voice sounded strange to my own ears. About 18 months ago, maybe longer. He finally looked at me directly. Norma, is any of this true? Are you ill? No, I said simply. I've never been healthier. His face darkened. Then why would Richard— Can I ask you something? I interrupted. Did my father ever file formal paperwork for power of attorney? Dr. Martin nodded slowly. He asked me to write a supporting letter last year documenting my concerns based on what he'd told me about your condition. I declined, of course. I explained I couldn't comment on a patient I hadn't examined in 5 years. He seemed upset by my refusal. Did he say who he got instead? He mentioned finding another doctor who was more understanding of family dynamics. Dr. Martin's expression had turned grim. Norma, if what you're telling me is true, if you're not ill— He tried to have me declared incompetent. I finished for him. He's been laying groundwork, creating a paper trail of mental instability. The doctor's face went pale. The petition was filed. You knew about it. I have friends at the courthouse. Medical professionals talk. He rubbed his face tiredly. They mentioned a competency hearing for Richard Brennan's daughter about 6 months ago, but it was dismissed. The judge found insufficient evidence. 6 months ago, while I'd been building my business landing my first major client, my father had been in court trying to strip me of my legal rights. The violation felt physical, like a blow to the stomach. Do you know why it was dismissed? I asked. The judge apparently questioned why Richard was seeking conservatorship when you were gainfully employed and living independently. Also, the medical documentation was questionable. The doctor who provided it had some issues with the medical board, I heard. So my father had found a disreputable doctor to lie about my condition, but even that hadn't been enough. The system had worked barely, but he'd tried. My own father had tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. Dr. Martin, I said slowly, would you be willing to testify about this conversation about my father asking you to lie about my health? The old man looked deeply uncomfortable. Norma, I'm 73 years old. I don't want to spend my retirement in legal battles. I understand, I said, though disappointment coursed through me. However, he continued, I keep meticulous records, including notes from every conversation about patient care, even informal ones. If those notes were to be subpoenaed— He let the statement hang between us. A promise without a promise. Documentation that could prove my father's lies if I knew how to access it legally. Thank you, I said quietly. Dr. Martin moved toward the door, then paused. Your mother would be horrified by all of this. She loved you fiercely, Norma. Never doubt that. After he left, I stood alone in the bathroom processing this new information. The stolen trust fund was bad enough, but this was an attempt to steal my autonomy, my freedom, my very self. And for what? To gain control of money that was already gone, spent on Patricia's beach house. No, this was about more than money. This was about control, about silencing the one person who might challenge their perfect family narrative. If I was declared incompetent, who would question the missing trust fund? Who would ask uncomfortable questions about my mother's death? Who would threaten the carefully constructed image of Richard Brennan Pillar of the legal community? I looked at myself in the mirror one more time. The name tag still proclaimed me the disappointment. But now I understood its true purpose. It wasn't just cruel mockery. It was part of a larger campaign to diminish me in the eyes of everyone who mattered. Make me a joke and no one would take my concerns seriously. Make me a disappointment and no one would question why my father needed conservatorship over his adult daughter. But they'd made a mistake. They'd pushed too hard, schemed too openly, and now I had pieces of their puzzle even if I didn't yet see the full picture. I opened my purse and pulled out my phone quickly, typing notes about everything Dr. Martin had told me. Dates, details, the mention of court records. Evidence was like breadcrumbs. You had to collect them carefully or they'd blow away. 5 minutes had passed. Enough time for a bathroom break, not so much that people would wonder. I smoothed my dress, straightened the offensive name tag, and prepared to return to my toast. But now it wouldn't be the toast they expected, because now I knew exactly how deep their betrayal went, and I had nothing left to lose. The ballroom buzzed with conversation when I returned, but it quieted as I walked back to my position. My champagne glass stood where I'd left it waiting. I picked it up again, tapping it once more for attention. "My apologies," I said, my voice steady and clear. "Now where was I? Yes, a toast to my father on his 60th birthday." I saw Patricia's satisfied smile, Emma's bored expression, my father's amused condescension. They thought the interruption had been fear, a moment of weakness before I resumed my role as family doormat. They had no idea that I'd just armed myself with the truth. To my father, I began raising my glass high. The man who taught me everything I know about family values. And for the first time all evening, I smiled. A real smile, because the lesson was about to begin. The ballroom fell silent as I stood there, champagne glass raised, my smile unwavering. The crowd waited for the predictable words, the stammered platitudes of a daughter desperate for approval, perhaps a few self-deprecating jokes to match my humiliating name tag. I could see it in their expectant faces, the way they leaned forward, slightly ready to witness another chapter in the sad story of Richard Brennan's disappointing daughter. Family values, I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. My father certainly has taught me about those values, like loyalty, honesty, the sacred bond between parent and child. I saw my father's eyes narrow slightly. Something in my tone had shifted, and he was too shrewd not to notice. Patricia, however, remained oblivious, her smile growing wider as she anticipated what she assumed would be my humiliation. "You know," I continued, my voice conversational as if I were sharing an amusing anecdote, "I've been thinking a lot about lessons lately, about the things we learn from our parents intentionally or otherwise. My father, for instance, taught me that success requires sacrifice." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Safe territory, they thought. "He taught me that the law is sacred, that justice matters, that integrity is non-negotiable." I paused, taking a small sip of champagne. Fascinating lessons, really, especially when you consider how creatively they can be interpreted. Emma shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She was quicker than her mother, sensing the undercurrent in my words, even if she couldn't identify its source. "But you know what the most valuable lesson has been?" I asked, my gaze sweeping across the room before settling on my father. He taught me that sometimes the people who speak loudest about values are the ones who understand them least. The comfortable murmuring stopped. Several guests exchanged uncertain glances. This wasn't following the expected script. Patricia's voice cut through the silence, sharp with irritation. "Norma, dear, perhaps you should sit down. You seem confused." Confused," I echoed, tilting my head thoughtfully. "That's interesting you should say that, Patricia. Confusion seems to be a recurring theme in our family. For instance, there appears to be some confusion about trust funds and who refused what." My father's face had gone very still, the practiced courtroom mask sliding into place. But I caught the slight tightening around his eyes, the almost imperceptible shift in his posture. He knew the game had changed, even if he didn't yet understand the new rules. "There's also some confusion about medical conditions." I continued, my voice still light, almost playful. "Degenerative diseases that don't exist, symptoms that never manifested. It's all very confusing indeed." "What are you talking about?" Emma demanded, her carefully modulated voice cracking slightly. I turned to her with something almost like pity. "Oh, Emma, sweet, promoted on her own merits, Emma. There's so much you don't know. But don't worry. Clarity is coming." My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "That's enough. You're clearly having some kind of episode. Perhaps you should—" "Sit down, Dad." The words came out with a quiet authority that surprised even me. For a moment, we stood facing each other across the crowded ballroom. The successful patriarch and his disappointment of a daughter locked in a silent battle of wills. I said I wanted to make a toast. I continued, never breaking eye contact. And unlike some people in this room, I keep my word. He sat slowly, his movements controlled, but his jaw clenched. Around us, the guests watched with a fascinated horror of witnesses to a car crash in slow motion. I reached into my purse, pulling out my phone with deliberate casualness. You know what's amazing about technology? The way it preserves things. Conversations, documents, truth. Norma, my father's voice carried a warning, the tone he used in courtrooms to intimidate witnesses. Whatever you think you're doing... What I'm doing, I interrupted, is giving you the birthday present you deserve, the gift of transparency. Isn't that what you always taught me, Dad? That the truth will set you free. I scrolled through my phone, finding what I needed. But before we get to the main event, I think our guests deserve some context. After all, they've been watching this family drama for years. They should understand what they've really been witnessing. Patricia stood now, her face flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. Security. Someone call security. Oh, Patricia, I said, my smile widening. Always so quick to silence opposing voices. But here's the thing. This isn't your beach house where you make the rules. You know the beach house in the Hamptons, the one that cost $480,000. She went white, not pale, but white, as if all the blood had drained from her face in an instant. Such a specific number, isn't it? I mused. Almost exactly the amount of a certain trust fund, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I looked around the room, making eye contact with the guests who'd laughed at my name tag, who'd found my father's cruel joke amusing. You've all been told a story about me. The family disappointment. The daughter who refused help, who was too proud or too stupid to accept her inheritance. Some of you have even heard worse. That I'm ill, that I'm unstable, that my father has had to consider taking legal action for my own protection. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Many hadn't heard these rumors, and the shock on their faces was genuine. All lies, I said simply, every single word. My father's mask finally cracked. You ungrateful... The truth, Dad? I cut him off. Remember your sacred principle. Well, tonight, everyone gets to hear it. I held up my phone, its screen bright in the dimmed lighting. Should we start with the trust fund you stole, or the medical records you falsified, or perhaps... I paused for effect. We should begin with a conversation between you and Patricia, one you didn't know was being recorded. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. Even the waitstaff had frozen trays held mid-air, captivated by the unfolding drama. You're bluffing, Patricia whispered, but her voice shook. Am I asked. Tell me, Patricia, do you remember what you said 2 years ago when you thought I was at work, when you were discussing your plans for my mother's trust fund with my father? She swayed slightly, gripping the table for support. Beside her, Emma looked between her parents with growing alarm, the first cracks appearing in her carefully constructed worldview. Or should we discuss the conversation about having me declared incompetent? I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. The one where you outlined exactly how you'd use that declaration to access funds you'd already stolen. Lies! My father roared, his composure finally shattering completely. You're sick, Norma. You need help. This is exactly why you tried to have me committed. I finished. Yes, let's talk about that. Let's talk about Dr. Martin, who you asked to lie about my medical condition. Let's talk about the sketchy doctor you found when he refused. Let's talk about the court petition that was thrown out because even a judge could see through your scheme. The room erupted, guests talking over each other, some pulling out their own phones, others moving toward the exits. But I wasn't done, not even close. I tapped my phone screen, connecting it to the ballroom's audio system. I'd noticed the Bluetooth capability earlier while setting up flowers, never imagining how useful that observation would become. But you know what? I said as my phone paired with the speakers. Words are just words, so let's hear it from the source, shall we? Patricia lunged for my phone, but I stepped back smoothly. Years of being the family outcast had taught me to always be aware of my exits, to always keep space between myself and potential threats. "Play it," someone called out from the crowd. I couldn't see who, but others took up the cry. "Let's hear it." My father stood again, his face purple with rage. "This is defamation slander. I'll sue you into oblivion." "Truth is an absolute defense against defamation," I quoted back at him. "Isn't that what you taught me? Your first lesson when I expressed interest in following your footsteps into law." I looked at him, then really looked at him. This man who'd raised me, who'd tucked me in at night before my mother died, who'd slowly transformed into a stranger, driven by greed and image. "This could have all been avoided," I said quietly, just for him. "All you had to do was love me, or at least pretend to, but you couldn't even manage that, could you?" For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Regret, recognition. But then it was gone, replaced by the cold calculation of a man who'd spent 40 years winning at any cost. "Play your recording," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "But know this, you're done. In this city, in this family, in any life that matters. You're done." I smiled sadly. "Dad, I've been done since the day Mom died. I just didn't know it until tonight." I touched my phone screen and the speakers crackled to life. Patricia's voice filled the ballroom, clear and unmistakable. "Once we get Norma declared incompetent, we can access her mother's trust fund." The ballroom erupted into chaos, but I stood calm in the storm's eye, finally free of the weight I'd carried for so long. The disappointment had found her voice, and the truth was setting everyone free. Just not in the way they'd expected. Patricia's recorded voice continued through the speakers, each word falling like a hammer blow in the silent ballroom. "Richard, you promised me that money when we married. I didn't sign up to play stepmother to that mouse without compensation." My father's response came next, equally clear. "Be patient, Pat. The trust fund is ironclad as long as she's competent. But if we can document enough incidents show a pattern of instability..." "How long?" Patricia's voice pressed. "I've already put a deposit on the beach house. The seller won't wait forever." 6 months, maybe less. I've got Harold convinced she refused the money out of pride. Once everyone believes that narrative, we can move the funds without questions." I watched the faces in the crowd transform from shock to horror. Harold Westbrook, who'd revealed the truth to me just hours earlier, had gone gray. Several of the law partners were already on their phones, likely calling emergency meetings. Emma's voice cut through the recording. "This is fake. She's using AI or something Dad would never..." But then her voice emerged from the speakers, too younger, more casual. "God, Norma's so pathetic. She actually thinks Dad might invite her to the firm's Christmas party." Patricia's laugh followed. "Let her think what she wants. The more desperate she seems, the easier it is to paint her as unstable. Did you tell the partners about her breakdown last month? The one that never happened." Emma's recorded voice carried a cruel amusement. "Of course. I even shed a few tears, talked about how worried I was about my poor troubled sister." The real Emma had gone silent, her face cycling through expressions of disbelief, anger, and what might have been the first stirrings of shame. The recording continued relentlessly. My father's voice returned. "The key is patience. We push too hard and even Norma might catch on. But if we're subtle, if we make everyone else see her as the problem..." "She's not stupid, Richard," Patricia warned. "That's what makes her dangerous." "She's not stupid," my father agreed, "but she's desperate for approval. That blinds her. As long as she thinks there's hope of being part of this family, she'll take whatever we dish out." I saw several guests flinch at that. How many of them had witnessed my attempts to connect with my family over the years? How many had watched me smile through insults, show up to events where I clearly wasn't wanted? Always hoping this time would be different. What about the medical angle? Patricia asked in the recording. Dr. Martin won't cooperate. I found alternatives. There's a doctor who lost his license in Jersey, but still practices here under the radar. For the right price, he'll swear she's showing early signs of dementia. She's 27, Richard. Early onset. Tragic, really. Runs in families sometimes, and with her mother's death being so traumatic. The recording suddenly jumped. I'd edited together several conversations for maximum impact. Patricia's voice returned dated 6 months later. The judge threw it out. Now what? We regroup, my father said. Maybe we don't need the incompetence angle. Maybe she just disappears. The gasp that ran through the ballroom was audible. Even I felt a chill at those words, though I knew he'd been speaking figuratively. Probably. You mean cut her off completely? I mean make her invisible. No invitations to family events. Tell people she's traveling, finding herself, whatever sounds plausible. If she doesn't exist, she can't make claims. But the trust fund is already transferred. Harold thinks she refused it. The paper trail supports that. By the time anyone thinks to question it, we'll have established years of her being unstable and estranged. The recording ended with Patricia's satisfied laugh. God, Richard, sometimes you scare me with how calculated you can be. It's not calculated, my father's voice concluded. It's necessary. Norma is a reminder of my first marriage, my early struggles. Emma is my future. Patricia, you're my present. Norma, she's just an unfortunate past that needs to be managed. I stopped the playback. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Harold Westbrook spoke in his voice shaking. Richard, tell me this isn't real. My father stood frozen, his mask of authority shattered. For the first time in my memory, he had no words, no smooth explanations or legal maneuvers. It's doctored, Patricia shrieked, finding her voice. She's edited it, taken things out of context. What context, I asked calmly, makes plotting to steal your stepdaughter's inheritance acceptable? What context justifies fraud and attempted conservatorship abuse? You recorded private conversations, she spat. That's illegal. Actually, one of the law partners, James Chen, spoke up. In this state, single-party consent laws apply. If Norma was present for these conversations, she had every right to record them. I wasn't always present, I admitted, but you should really check your smart home devices, Patricia. The baby monitor you insisted on installing in the living room for when you had grandchildren. It has an app with cloud storage. Patricia's face went from white to green. You've been spying on us for years, Emma asked, her voice small and shocked. No, I said firmly. I discovered the recordings by accident 6 months ago when you asked me to help set up your new phone, Patricia. I was trying to transfer your apps, and I found hours of automatic recordings. I only listened to them after Dad tried to have me declared incompetent. I needed to know why. And now you're getting revenge. My father had found his voice again, though it lacked its usual power. Destroying your family over money. Family. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. What family? The one that labeled me the disappointment. The one that stole my inheritance, the one that tried to have me locked away. That's not family, Dad. That's a criminal conspiracy. Criminal, Patricia sneered. You have no proof of anything criminal, so we talked about managing a difficult situation. That's not illegal. Theft is illegal, I countered. Fraud is illegal. Falsifying medical documents is illegal. And speaking of illegal... I swiped to a new file on my phone. This is interesting. It's an email from you, Dad, instructing your accountant to transfer funds from the Brennan Family Trust to a personal account, the account that purchased Patricia's beach house, dated 3 days after you told Harold I'd refuse my inheritance. How did you get access to your emails? I smiled. I didn't. Your accountant did. Turns out when the FBI starts investigating financial fraud, people become very cooperative. The word FBI rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Several more guests headed for the exits, not wanting to be present for whatever came next. You went to the FBI! My father's voice was barely a whisper. No, I said. They came to me. Turns out you're not as careful with client funds as you are with family trusts, but that's a conversation for part 8. Emma stood abruptly, her chair falling backward. I can't. I need air. Whoa, sit down, Emma, Patricia commanded, but her voice lacked its usual authority. No, Emma said, looking at me with something like newfound respect mixed with fear. I'm done. I can't be part of this anymore. You are part of this, Patricia snarled. You helped. You spread the lies about her being unstable. Because you told me to, Emma shot back. Because Dad said it was for her own good. You said she was sick, that she needed help, that we were protecting her. And you believed that? I asked quietly. Emma, we grew up in the same house. When have you ever seen me show signs of mental illness? Emma's face crumbled. I wanted to believe it. It was easier than admitting what, that you were competition, she whispered. That Dad might love you as much as he loved me if you ever got your act together. So when they said you were sick, it made sense. It explained why you got nothing and I got everything. The honesty in her voice was devastating. For the first time in years, I saw my little sister instead of Patricia's puppet. Oh, Emma, I said sadly, I was never competition. Dad made his choice the day he married Patricia. We were just too young to see it. This is ridiculous, Patricia interjected. You're all acting like she's some kind of victim. She's a failure who's bitter about her success. What success? I interrupted. The stolen trust fund. The affairs Dad's been hiding. Oh, did I not mention those yet? The room, which had begun to buzz with conversation, fell silent again. That's right. I continued, looking directly at Patricia. While you were scheming to steal my inheritance, Dad was busy with his secretary. Well, his former secretary, and that paralegal from the downtown office. And... Stop! Patricia's scream was primal, the sound of someone watching their world collapse. What? I asked. Are you the only one allowed to reveal family secrets? The only one who gets to humiliate people at parties? I looked around the room at the shocked faces of people who'd known our family for years. You all watched this happen, every slight, every insult, every cruel joke at my expense. You saw a young woman being systematically destroyed by her own family, and you said nothing because Richard Brennan was too powerful to challenge. Norma, one of my father's partners, William Brenner, spoke carefully. These are serious allegations. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. Privately? I laughed bitterly, like the private discussions about transferring client funds, like the private meetings where you all decided to look the other way while Richard played fast and loose with escrow accounts. William went pale. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, I said clearly. I'm stating facts. Facts that the FBI found very interesting when I shared them 3 months ago, but we'll get to that in a moment. I looked at my father one last time. The powerful Richard Brennan was gone, replaced by an aging man whose empire was crumbling in real time. Happy birthday, Dad, I said quietly. I hope it's memorable. Then I pressed play on the next recording, and the real show began. The new recording started with my father's voice, but this time he was talking to someone named Marcus, his private accountant. The conversation was dated just 3 weeks ago. The Henderson Trust is overfunded by $2 million. We need to redistribute before the audit. Marcus's nervous voice replied, Mr. Brennan, moving client funds without authorization is necessary to maintain liquidity across all accounts. The Hendersons will never notice. They haven't looked at their statements in 5 years. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. The Hendersons were major clients, an elderly couple who trusted my father with their entire estate. But if they do notice, they won't. And even if they did, we'd explain it as an accounting error, move half to the Morrison account and half to operating expenses. The Morrison account that's already showing a deficit. Exactly. It'll balance the books, make it look like we corrected an earlier mistake. I paused the recording and addressed the stunned audience. For those keeping track, that's embezzlement, wire fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. But wait, there's more. Several of my father's law partners were frantically typing on their phones. I could see the panic in their eyes. If Richard had been stealing from clients, they could all be liable. The recording resumed, jumping to another conversation from 6 months earlier. This time my father was speaking with Patricia. The FBI audit is next month. We need to clean things up. How bad is it? Patricia's voice was tense. I've been borrowing from client accounts for years. Small amounts usually paid back within days. But with the market downtown... How much, Richard? A pause. Then, across all accounts, about 8 million. The sound Patricia made was inhuman, something between a gasp and a shriek. It's fine, my father continued quickly. I can cover most of it by liquidating some assets. The rest, I'll figure it out. Figure it out. Richard, this is prison-level fraud. Only if they catch it. And they won't. I've been doing this for 20 years, Pat. I know how to make the numbers work. I stopped the recording again, letting that sink in. 20 years of fraud, 2 decades of stealing from clients who trusted him. You might be wondering how I got these recordings, I said conversationally. Well, it turns out Marcus, the accountant, has been keeping his own insurance policy. Every conversation, every questionable instruction, all recorded and backed up. When the FBI approached him with a warrant last month, he was very eager to cooperate. During last month, James Chen, the law partner who'd spoken earlier, stood slowly. You've known about this for a month and said nothing. I said nothing to you, I corrected. I said plenty to the federal investigators who've been building their case. In fact, I've been working as a confidential informant for the past 90 days. The revelation sent another shock wave through the room. My father sank into his chair, aging a decade in seconds. That's impossible, he muttered. You don't have the access, the knowledge. Actually, I do, I interrupted. Remember 3 years ago when you had that minor surgery and needed someone to handle your emails for a week? You gave me temporary access to your systems. What you didn't know is that your IT department never revoked that access. Oversight on their part, but very helpful for building a federal case. You've been spying on me for 3 years, his voice cracked with disbelief. No, Dad. I discovered the access 6 months ago when I was hired to investigate financial irregularities at Morrison Industries. Imagine my surprise when I traced the fraud back to your firm. To you specifically. Emma, who had been silent since her earlier outburst, suddenly spoke up. Morrison Industries, but that's... Dad, you said they were lying about the missing funds. You said it was a disgruntled employee trying to frame the firm. He lied, I said simply, just like he lied about my trust fund, my mental health, and apparently his entire career. William Brenner stepped forward, his face ashen. Richard, we need to discuss this immediately. If the FBI is investigating... They're not investigating, I clarified. They're done investigating. They've been done for 2 weeks. They're just waiting for one more piece of evidence before making arrests. What evidence? My father demanded, some of his old fire returning. I smiled. A full confession would be nice, but failing that, they'll settle for the backup drives Marcus is turning over tomorrow morning. 20 years of fraudulent transactions, all meticulously documented. Marcus wouldn't dare. Marcus already has... I cut him off. He's been in witness protection for 2 weeks. The man you've been meeting with FBI agent. They needed to see if you'd continue the pattern even while under investigation. Patricia let out a strangled sob. Our assets. They'll freeze everything. Already done, I confirmed. As of 5 p.m. today, all accounts connected to Richard Brennan are under federal seal. The beach house, the cars, the investment accounts, all frozen pending investigation. But that's my money too, Patricia wailed. Community property, I said with false sympathy. Such a double-edged sword. What's his is yours, including criminal liability. Emma turned on her parents with fury. You told me the promotion was real. You said I earned it. You did earn it, sweetheart, my father started, but I cut him off with another recording. This time, it was a conversation between my father and the senior partners dated 2 months ago. Emma needs to be promoted before the audit. If she's in a position of authority, we can funnel some of the questionable transactions through her department. Make it look like junior employee error if anything surfaces. You're suggesting we frame your own daughter? One partner asked, incredulous. Frame is a strong word. She'll never know. But if investigators start digging better, they find breadcrumbs leading to a naive junior associate than to senior partners. I watched Emma's face crumble completely. In one recording, her entire self-image, the successful daughter earning her place through merit, shattered like glass. You were going to let me take the fall, she whispered. Your own daughter. It wouldn't have come to that, my father said desperately. I would have protected you. Like you protected Norma, Emma's voice rose. Like you protected Mom from finding out about your affairs. Like you protected your client's money. The mention of affairs brought Patricia's head up sharply. We'll discuss that later, my father said quickly, but I was already pulling up the next file. Actually, let's discuss it now, I suggested. Patricia, did you know about Jessica, your sister? Patricia went very still. What about Jessica? Well, according to these text messages between her and my father, I pretended to scroll through my phone. Oh my, these are quite explicit, especially the ones from last Tuesday. Weren't you at your book club? Patricia? You're lying. But her voice was hollow defeated. Suite 412 at the Marriott. Charged to the company card naturally. Would you like to see the receipts? Or perhaps the security footage the FBI pulled? Patricia turned on my father with a fury I'd never seen before. Jessica, my baby sister, she's 32 years old, Richard. Pat, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. She slapped him across the face, the crack echoing through the ballroom. You perverted son of a... Language, Patricia, I chided. We have guests. She whirled on me, mascara streaming down her face. You did this. You destroyed everything. No, I said firmly. You did this. All of you. Every lie, every betrayal, every stolen dollar. That was your choice. I just brought receipts. The FBI doesn't have anything solid, my father said desperately, lawyer instincts kicking in. Recordings can be challenged. Financial records can be explained. You're right, I agreed, which is why they needed something more concrete. Like say you attempting to transfer client funds while under active investigation, which you did, yesterday, when you moved $200,000 from the Wallace Trust to cover your personal account shortfall. His face went gray. That was necessary to commit another felony while federal agents watched. I pulled up a final recording. This is from yesterday afternoon, you instructing Marcus, or rather, Special Agent Martinez, to falsify billing records to hide the transfer. My father's voice on the recording was clear. Bill it to the Wallace account as consultation fees. Backdate it to last month. They won't notice, and even if they do, we'll call it a clerical error. Consciousness of guilt, James Chen murmured. Textbook. The transfers were legitimate, my father protested. Then you won't mind when the Wallaces ask to see the consultation notes? I asked. Oh wait, there aren't any, because no consultation happened. You just needed to cover the mortgage payment on Patricia's beach house. The room erupted again, but this time I noticed several people weren't shocked. They were angry. Clients who'd trusted my father, colleagues who'd been unknowingly implicated in his schemes, friends who'd been lied to for decades. How long have you been planning this? Emma asked me, her voice small and broken. Planning, I repeated. Emma, I didn't plan any of this. I discovered it, piece by piece, while trying to understand why my own father hated me enough to destroy my life. Turns out, it wasn't about me at all. I was just collateral damage in his endless greed. So you decided to destroy him back. I considered her question seriously. No, I decided to tell the truth. If that destroys him, that's on him, not me. The truth, my father spat. You have no idea what the truth cost me. Building this firm, this reputation, you can't imagine the sacrifices. Sacrifices like my mother. The question slipped out before I could stop it. The ballroom went deadly silent. What? My father's voice was barely audible. I repeated slowly, sacrifices like my mother, the woman who discovered your first embezzlement scheme, the woman who was driving to meet an FBI agent the night she died. That's quite a coincidence, don't you think? You're suggesting? William Brenner couldn't finish the sentence. I'm suggesting nothing, I said carefully. I'm simply observing that the timing was remarkably convenient, and that the brake line failure was never adequately explained, and that the FBI agent she was supposed to meet reported her as a no-show, closing the investigation shortly after. That's insane, Patricia breathed. Richard, tell her that's insane. But my father said nothing, staring at me with eyes that held secrets I might never uncover. The FBI is very interested in reopening that case, I continued, especially since they found the original accident report, the one that mentioned possible tampering. Funny how that detail disappeared from the official file. Enough! My father roared, standing so quickly his chair toppled backward. You want to destroy me, fine, but you will not stand there and accuse me of... Of what, Dad? I challenged. What exactly am I accusing you of? I've only stated facts. If those facts lead to uncomfortable conclusions... He lunged toward me, but James and William caught his arms, holding him back. The distinguished Richard Brennan reduced to physical violence in front of his peers. Get her out of here, he screamed. Get her out! Actually, I said, pulling out one last item from my purse, a folded document. I'll see myself out, but first, a gift. I set the paper on the table in front of him. It's a subpoena. You've been called to testify before a federal grand jury on Monday. Happy birthday, Dad. I turned to address the room one last time. For those of you wondering about your own liability, the FBI will be contacting each of you individually. I'd suggest retaining counsel. Good counsel, not from this firm. As I headed for the door, Emma called out, Norma, wait. I paused, but didn't turn around. What happens to us now? She asked, her voice broken. That depends on you, I said, finally looking back. The FBI has no evidence of your involvement in the financial crimes. You're a victim, not a perpetrator. What you do with that second chance is up to you. Mom? She glanced at Patricia, who seemed to have dissociated, entirely staring blankly at the wall. Community property works both ways. She benefited from the proceeds of his crimes. There will be consequences. But I'll lose everything, Emma whispered. No, I corrected gently. You'll lose everything he stole. What you build after that, that'll be yours. Really yours. I walked toward the exit, my heels clicking on the marble floor. Behind me, chaos reigned, shouting, crying, accusations flying, but I felt oddly peaceful. The weight I'd carried for so long was gone. At the door, I turned back one last time. My father was slumped in his chair, aged and defeated. Patricia wept hysterically, while Emma stood frozen, processing the ruins of her life. The party guests clustered in groups, already distancing themselves from the radioactive Brennan family. Oh, I almost forgot, I called out. To finish my toast, here's to family, to truth, and to the last time you'll ever see me as the disappointment. I raised an imaginary glass, then walked out the door, leaving behind the only life I'd ever known and stepping into something entirely new. I had barely made it to the parking lot when I heard footsteps running behind me. The October night was crisp and my breath formed small clouds in the cool air. I didn't need to turn around to know who was following me. The designer heels clicking against asphalt had a particular rhythm I'd heard for years. Norma, stop, please. I paused beside my 10-year-old Honda Civic, the car my father had mocked so many times. Emma caught up, breathless and disheveled, mascara streaking down her cheeks in black rivers. Gone was the polished professional, replaced by a terrified young woman watching her world implode. How could you? She gasped, gripping a nearby car for support. How could you do this to us? I studied her carefully. Even in distress, Emma was beautiful. Patricia's genes and my father's money had ensured that. But for the first time, I saw past the facade to something rawer, more human. I didn't do anything to you, Emma. I revealed what was already there. You destroyed our family. No, I said calmly, unlocking my car. Our family was destroyed years ago. I just pulled back the curtain. She lunged forward, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. You think you've won? You think this makes you better than us? I gently removed her hand. I don't think anything, Emma. I know I'm free. That's all I wanted. Free. She laughed bitterly. You're alone. You've always been alone, and now you always will be. I've been alone in a room full of family for 20 years, I replied. Being alone by myself is an improvement. Her face crumpled further, and she pulled out her phone with shaking hands. I need to check. She frantically opened her banking app, entering passwords with trembling fingers. I knew what she'd find before her scream confirmed it. It's gone. Everything's gone. She showed me the screen. Account frozen by federal order. My trust fund, my savings, even my checking account. Asset forfeiture. I explained. Standard procedure when investigating financial crimes. They'll release legitimate funds after the investigation, but anything connected to your father's fraud. But I earned this money. My salary, my bonuses. Your salary from the firm involved in federal crimes. Your bonuses based on fraudulent profits. I shook my head. Emma, you were promoted specifically to be a potential fall guy. Every dollar you've earned there is tainted. She sank onto the asphalt designer dress, and all her phone clattering beside her. I have nothing. No money, no job, no future. The partners will fire me tomorrow, if the firm even survives. You have a law degree, I pointed out, an expensive education paid for with stolen money, but the knowledge is still yours. Who would hire Richard Brennan's daughter? She wailed. I'm toxic, radioactive. My career is over before it began. I should have felt satisfaction watching her realize what I'd known for years, that the Brennan name was a curse, not a blessing. Instead, I felt only pity. Do you remember, I asked quietly, when we were kids before Mom died? Emma looked up confused by the change in topic. You were so little, I continued. Maybe 4 years old. You used to follow me everywhere, called me No-No because you couldn't say Norma properly. I don't remember, she said flatly. I do. You'd crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I'd tell you stories about brave princesses until you fell asleep. I smiled at the memory. Then Mom died and Patricia appeared, and suddenly you weren't allowed in my room anymore, weren't allowed to need me anymore. Mom said you were a bad influence, Emma whispered, said you'd make me weak like your mother. And you believed her. I was 7. What was I supposed to believe? Fresh tears streamed down her face. She was my mother, and she told me you were dangerous, unstable. Dad confirmed it. Every adult in my life told me to stay away from you. And when you got older, when you could think for yourself. Emma was quiet for a long moment. It was easier to believe it. If you were sick, if you were the problem, then I didn't have to feel guilty about having everything while you had nothing. The honesty was unexpected. In 20 years, it was the most real conversation we'd ever had. I hated you, she admitted. Not because of anything you did, but because you existed. You were proof that Dad could love someone else, that there was a before Patricia time. Mom made sure I knew I was the real daughter, the wanted one. But you were always there, this ghost haunting our perfect life. Some perfection. I observed, gesturing toward the country club where chaos still reigned. Emma laughed humorlessly. I know, God, I know. But when you're inside it, when everyone tells you how lucky you are, how perfect your life is, you start to believe it. You have to believe it because otherwise you'd have to admit you're complicit in destroying someone's life. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. Yes. We sat in silence, an unlikely pair in the parking lot. The golden daughter on the ground in her designer dress, the disappointment standing over her in clearance rack clothing. That recording, Emma said suddenly, about Dad setting me up to take the fall, is it real? Every word. He was really going to let me go to prison for his crimes. He was going to try, whether it would have worked. I shrugged. The FBI was already on to him. You might have been collateral damage, but they were after bigger fish. Collateral damage, she repeated numbly. Is that what we were to him? You and me, both? I was an inconvenience, I said. You were a tool. Neither of us were daughters. Not really. Emma's phone buzzed. She looked at it reflexively, then showed me the screen. Text after text from her social circle, her colleagues, her sorority sisters. The subject line of one email was visible. Is it true about your dad? They're already distancing themselves, she said wonderingly. People I've known for years. My best friend just uninvited me from her wedding. Welcome to my world. She looked up sharply. Is that what this was about, making me feel what you felt? No, Emma, this was about stopping a man who's been stealing for 20 years. You're just... Collateral damage, she finished. I get it. But she didn't. Not really. She was experiencing the first hours of social exile. I'd lived it for 2 decades. Can I ask you something? Emma said suddenly. The stuff about Mom, your mom. Do you really think Dad... I don't know, I admitted. Probably not. He's many things, but I don't think he's a murderer. Just a man whose lies created the perfect storm for tragedy. But you let everyone in there think... I stated facts. People drew their own conclusions. I paused. Just like people drew conclusions about me based on the lies you all told. Emma winced. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I know it doesn't change anything, but... It changes everything, I said quietly. It's the first honest thing you've said to me in 20 years. More silence. In the distance, sirens wailed. Whether coming to the country club or passing by, I couldn't tell. What do I do now? Emma asked, sounding very young. I don't know how to be poor. I don't know how to be nobody. You learn, I said simply. You get a job. A real job, not one handed to you. You live within your means. You discover who you are when you're not Richard Brennan's daughter. And if I can't, then you're not the person I hoped you might be. I opened my car door. Emma, I'm going to give you some advice, the kind no one ever gave me. Run. Get out of this city, change your name if you have to. Start fresh somewhere, the Brennan name means nothing. I can't just leave. Yes, you can. You're 25, healthy, educated. You have options I never had. Use them. Mom will need me. Patricia has her own family. Let them deal with her. I started the engine. Emma, I'm going to tell you something I wish someone had told me. You don't owe them anything. Not loyalty, not support, not sacrifice. They made their choices. Now make yours. She stood slowly, dignity somewhat restored despite her tear-stained face and rumpled dress. Will I see you again? I don't know, maybe, if you become someone worth knowing. That's cruel. That's honest. I've spent 28 years surrounded by liars. I'm done with pretty words that mean nothing. Emma stepped back from the car, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. For what it's worth, Norma, I think you're brave. Braver than any of us. I'm not brave, I said through the open window. I just had nothing left to lose. As I drove away, I watched her in the rearview mirror, a small figure in red alone in a parking lot facing an uncertain future. Part of me wanted to stop to offer her refuge, to be the sister I'd always wished for. But 20 years of rejection had taught me the danger of hope. Emma would have to save herself, just as I had. My phone buzzed with incoming texts, reporters already, probably, or colleagues wanting the inside scoop. I ignored them all. Tonight wasn't about what came next. Tonight was about closing a chapter that had consumed my entire adult life. But even as I drove toward my modest apartment, I knew the story wasn't over. The FBI investigation would continue. The trial would be brutal. The truth about my mother's death might never be fully known. And somewhere in the city, a 25-year-old woman was learning what it meant to be nobody special. A lesson that might destroy her or might save her. Only time would tell which Emma would emerge from the ashes of the Brennan Empire. 20 minutes after leaving Emma in the parking lot, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "You poisonous little bitch!" Patricia's voice was different. Gone was the practiced sweetness, replaced by something raw and venomous. "Hello, Patricia." I pulled into a gas station, knowing this conversation deserved my full attention. "Don't you hello me. You've destroyed everything. My marriage, my home, my entire life. Your marriage to a man who's been cheating with your sister. Your home bought with stolen money that life..." A sharp intake of breath. Jessica would never... Suite 412 at the Marriott. Every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 months. Would you like me to forward you the credit card statements? Silence, then quieter. You're lying. I'm many things, Patricia, but not a liar. That's your family's specialty. My family. Her laugh was bitter. You want to talk about family? Let me tell you about family, you self-righteous little... Careful, I warned. This call is being recorded. Another pause. Patricia was many things, but not stupid. What do you want? She finally asked. Nothing. I have everything I need. Then why destroy us? Why not just take your money and go? I considered how to answer. Do you remember my mother's funeral? What does that have to do with... You wore a red dress, I continued. My mother's body wasn't even cold, and you showed up to her funeral in a red cocktail dress. I was 10 years old, and even I knew that was wrong. It was burgundy, and I didn't have anything black. You moved into our house 2 weeks later. You boxed up her things while I was at school. Her jewelry, her books, her photos. All gone when I came home. You told me it was unhealthy to dwell. You were clinging to the past. I was a child who'd lost her mother. The words came out sharper than intended. I took a breath, regaining control. But you didn't see a grieving child. You saw competition. Competition? Patricia scoffed. You were a mousy little thing who cried all the time. Hardly competition. Then why work so hard to erase me? Silence stretched between us. Through the gas station window, I watched normal people living normal lives untouched by the drama consuming my family. You looked like her? Patricia finally said, her voice strange. Exactly like her. Richard couldn't look at you without seeing Claire. Do you know what that's like, to compete with a ghost? So you decided to destroy her daughter? I decided to secure my future, she corrected. Richard was damaged goods when I met him. Brilliant, successful, but haunted. Claire's death broke something in him. And you fixed him? I gave him permission to move on, to stop wallowing in guilt and build something new. Her voice hardened. But you were always there, this living reminder of his failure. His failure... Patricia laughed ugly and knowing. You really don't know, do you, little Miss Detective? And you never figured out the simplest truth. What truth? The night your mother died, they'd been fighting. She'd found out about his embezzlement. You got that part right, but she'd also found out about his affairs. Plural. Your sainted mother wasn't driving to meet the FBI about money. She was meeting with a divorce attorney. The world tilted slightly. You're lying. I checked the records. Diane Morrison Esquire, specialized in high-asset divorces. Your mother had an appointment at 8 p.m. Never made it. I gripped the phone tighter. How do you know this? Because Richard told me. One night, drunk and maudlin, spilling secrets like a broken dam. He'd begged Claire not to leave, promised to change, swore the affairs meant nothing. She laughed at him, told him he was pathetic. And then? And then she got in her car and drove away. He followed, begging through her window at red lights, making a scene. She finally pulled over on that dark road to tell him to stop embarrassing himself. My mouth went dry. He was there. He was there when she drove off. Angry, distracted, probably crying. The road was wet. She took the curve too fast. Patricia paused. He watched it happen. Watched her car go over the edge. Called 911, played the concerned husband who just happened to be driving the same route. But the brake lines were fine. That was one investigator's theory, never proven. Your father might be many things, but he's not mechanically inclined. He couldn't tamper with a bicycle, let alone a car. I sat in stunned silence processing this revelation. All these years I'd wondered if my father was a murderer. The truth was somehow worse. He was a coward who'd driven my mother to her death through his betrayal, then watched her die. So, you see, Patricia continued, you weren't just Claire's daughter. You were his guilt personified. Every time he looked at you, he saw that night, saw her driving away, saw what his choices had cost. So he chose to punish me for it. He chose to survive. And I helped him. We built a new life, a successful life. Emma was supposed to be our fresh start. But you, she sighed, you were the stone in our shoe, the ghost at our feast. Always there, always reminding. So you stole from me. We redirected resources to where they do the most good. Emma could build on Richard's legacy. You'd have squandered it, just like your mother squandered her life on jealousy and anger. The casual cruelty took my breath away. She didn't squander anything. She was murdered by betrayal, even if the weapon was just a wet road and a broken heart. Dramatic as always, Patricia sneered. This is why we could never accept you. This emotional instability. Emotional instability. You just admitted to systematic theft and 20 years of psychological abuse. I admitted to protecting my family from a damaged child who grew into a vindictive woman. Her voice turned calculating. But none of this matters now, does it? The FBI has their evidence. Richard will go to prison. I'll lose everything. You've won. Have I? My mother is still dead. 20 years of my life are still stolen. My sister is still a stranger. What exactly have I won? Your revenge, Patricia spat. I hope it keeps you warm at night. It won't, I admitted. But truth has its own comfort. At least now I know why. All these years wondering what I did wrong, what made me so unlovable. Turns out it was never about me at all. Everything is about you, Patricia exploded. This whole production tonight, the recordings, the FBI, all because you couldn't accept your place. My place? I laughed, genuinely amused. Patricia, I never had a place. That was the point. You made sure of that. And now you've made sure none of us have places. The house is seized, the accounts frozen. Did you know they showed up during the party, FBI agents swarming our home like locusts? Our neighbors watched them carry out boxes, computers, files. The humiliation? Where will you go? Why feeling guilty? Her voice turned hopeful. You could tell them I wasn't involved, that I didn't know. But you did know. You knew everything. You participated actively. I cut off her manipulation attempt. Patricia, you made your choices. Now live with them. My choices? She laughed bitterly. I chose to love a man who couldn't love me back, who saw his dead wife every time he looked at me. Do you know he called me Claire sometimes during intimate moments? I grimaced, not wanting that image. I'm sorry he hurt you, but you chose to stay, chose to hurt others to keep him. I chose survival, she corrected, just like you did tonight. We're not so different, Norma. We're nothing alike. Aren't we both wanted Richard's love. Neither of us got it. We both did terrible things in response. The only difference is that you won. No, I said firmly. The difference is that I told the truth. You spent 20 years living a lie. Your truth destroyed 4 lives tonight. Your lies destroyed them years ago. I just exposed the damage. Silence fell again. In the background, I could hear sounds. Car doors. Voices. Patricia was probably at a hotel, her seized mansion no longer available. Jessica, she said suddenly, is it true about her and Richard? Yes. A sound like breaking glass, perhaps literally. My baby sister, I brought her into our lives, introduced them. She was supposed to be rebuilding after her divorce, and You invited the wolf into the henhouse, I finished. Though to be fair, you didn't know you'd married a wolf. I knew, she said quietly. Part of me always knew, but the money, the status, the life, I told myself it was worth it, that everyone made compromises. Some compromises cost too much. Everything costs too much, Patricia said tiredly. Love, hate, revenge. It all comes with a price tag. Tonight, we both paid in full. The bill was 20 years in the making. Was it worth it? She asked. Destroying your father, humiliating Emma, ruining me. Was it worth becoming the villain in your own story? I considered the question honestly. I'm not the villain, Patricia. I'm the consequence. You all wrote this story with every lie, every theft, every cruelty. I just provided the ending. Some ending, she muttered. Everyone loses. Sometimes that's the only honest ending available. You could have just taken your money and left, started fresh somewhere else. With what money you stole it, with what life you destroyed my reputation, with what family you made sure I had none. I shook my head, though she couldn't see it. Running away would have let you win. So instead, you made sure everyone lost. I made sure the truth came out. What happened after that was just gravity. Things falling where they naturally would without lies holding them up. Patricia was quiet for so long I wondered if she'd hung up. Then, do you know what the saddest part is? What? If you'd just played along, been the grateful stepdaughter, accepted the scraps we offered, we might have actually learned to love you, eventually. The casual cruelty of that statement, the idea that I should have been grateful for abuse in hopes of maybe someday earning conditional love, was breathtaking. Patricia, I said gently, that's exactly why I had to do this, because you still don't understand how monstrous that sounds. Monstrous, she laughed bitterly. Wait until you're my age, Norma. Wait until you've compromised everything for security that can vanish in an instant. Then tell me about monsters. I'll be 55 someday, I agreed, but I'll face it with clean hands and a clear conscience. Can you say the same? Ora, clean hands. Her voice turned vicious again. Your hands are covered in blood, your family's blood. You're a kinslayer, a betrayer. No one will ever trust you again. I'll live with that. Will you, when you're alone on holidays, when you have no one to call in crisis, when you die unmourned and unmissed, will you live with that? I've been alone my whole life, I reminded her. At least now I'm alone with dignity. Dignity doesn't pay rent. Dignity doesn't warm your bed or hold your hand in the hospital. Dignity is a luxury for people with trust funds. Oh, wait, you don't have one anymore. Neither do you. That silenced her again. When she spoke, her voice was smaller. What am I supposed to do? Now I'm 55 years old. I haven't worked in 20 years. My assets are frozen, my reputation is destroyed, my marriage is over, and my sister... She choked on the words. You survive, I said simply, just like I did. I don't know how. Then learn or don't. But either way, it's no longer my concern. You're enjoying this, she accused, watching me squirm. No, I said honestly. I'm tired, Patricia. Bone-deep, soul-weary tired. This isn't enjoyment. It's ending. I needed this to end. By ending us. By ending the lies, you ended yourselves. More silence. Then, your mother would be ashamed of you. The words were meant to wound, but they fell flat. My mother would be alive if not for the choices you all made. Her shame means nothing from the grave you all put her in. We didn't kill her. You killed her memory. You killed her daughter's childhood. You killed any chance of healing or honesty. That's death enough. Patricia's breath hitched. Maybe tears, maybe rage. I hope you're happy. I hope this vengeful satisfaction fills the empty hole where your heart should be. I don't need satisfaction, I said. I just needed truth. The rest is just aftermath. Aftermath, she repeated. We're all just aftermath to you. No, Patricia, you're aftermath to your own choices. I'm just the witness who finally spoke up. Witness, judge, executioner, you played all the parts. Because no one else would. Because the system protected him until I gave it proof. Because 20 years of silence was 20 years too long. And now I rebuild, without lies, without theft, without any of you. It won't be easy, but it'll be honest. Honest and alone. Better than dishonest in a crowd of liars? She laughed one more time, broken and bitter. You know what, you're right. We deserve this. All of it. I just wish... What? I wish you'd been wrong about all of it. I wish we'd been the family we pretended to be. So do I admitted, but wishes don't change truth. No, she agreed. They don't. The line went dead. Patricia had hung up without goodbye. Fitting, really. We'd never really said hello either. I sat in my car outside the gas station watching normal people live their normal lives. Tomorrow the news would break. The Brennan family scandal would dominate legal circles, maybe make national news. My father would be arrested. Patricia would hire lawyers with money she didn't have. Emma would face a future stripped of everything she'd taken for granted. And I would go home to my small apartment, to my quiet life, to my hard-won freedom. It wasn't much, but it was mine, earned honestly and held without shame. My phone buzzed with another unknown number. Then another. The vultures were circling already. Reporters, gossips, curiosity seekers. I turned it off, granting myself a few hours of peace before tomorrow's storm. As I drove home through empty streets, I thought about Patricia's words. Kinslayer, betrayer, family destroyer. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was all those things. But I was also a survivor, a truth teller, a woman who'd refused to be erased. And for tonight, that was enough. The next morning, I woke to find 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and my apartment building swarming with reporters. Through my window, I could see news vans lined up like vultures, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like hungry beaks. My phone rang again, this time a number I recognized. Marcus, my father's accountant, or rather, Special Agent Martinez. Ms. Brennan, this is Agent Martinez. We need to meet. I thought we were done, I said, making coffee one-handed. I gave you everything I had. Something new has come up. Can you come to the federal building within the hour? The urgency in his voice made me pause. Is this about the arrest? Your father was taken into custody at 6 a.m. this morning, but this is about something else. Something you said last night about your mother. My blood chilled. What about her? Just come in, please. Agent Sarah Chen will explain everything. An hour later, I sat in a sterile federal building conference room across from Agent Chen, a woman with sharp eyes and an unreadable expression. Martinez sat beside her, looking uncomfortable. Ms. Brennan, Agent Chen began, I lead the cold case division. Last night's recording of your father's party was illuminating. I didn't mean to imply... You implied plenty, she interrupted, enough to warrant reopening a 20-year-old case file. But first, I need to ask, do you have any concrete evidence regarding your mother's death? I shook my head. Just questions, coincidences. The timing was suspicious, Chen agreed. Claire Brennan discovered her husband's embezzlement. She scheduled a meeting with both an FBI agent and a divorce attorney. She died in a single-car accident en route to those meetings. The brake lines were examined and found intact. However, Chen pulled out a file. The original investigator noted something interesting. There was paint transfer on your mother's bumper, black paint inconsistent with striking any barrier at the scene. My heart raced. Someone hit her. Possibly, or she hit something earlier and didn't report it. 20 years ago, forensic technology was limited, but now... She smiled thinly. We can do much more with old evidence. You still have evidence from the crash. Standard procedure for fatal accidents. Everything was preserved. Chen leaned forward. But we need more than suspicion to exhume a case this old. That's where you come in. I don't understand. Martinez spoke up. Your father made a mistake last night. After you left, after the FBI arrested him, he made a phone call. He thought he was calling his lawyer. But in his panic, he called the wrong number. He called his brother William, who was already cooperating with us. The call was recorded. Chen pressed play on a digital recorder. My father's voice slurred with alcohol and fear filled the room. Billy, I need you to go to the storage unit, the one in Jersey, Unit 47B. There's a box in the back marked Claire's Things. Burn it, tonight, before they get a warrant. William's voice responded carefully. Richard, what's in the box? Just do it. It's nothing important. Old photos, but they'll twist it, make it look bad, like they're twisting everything else. Richard, I can't. You owe me, Billy. Remember Miami. Remember what I covered up for you. You owe me. The recording ended. Chen watched my face carefully. We executed a warrant on that storage unit 2 hours ago, she said. Would you like to know what we found? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Chen opened the evidence box, pulling out items in sealed bags. Your mother's missing jewelry, the pieces you thought Patricia sold, her diary, including entries from the week before her death, and this. She placed a small digital recorder on the table, ancient by today's standards, but high-tech for 20 years ago. Your mother was recording conversations with your father. She knew about the affairs, the embezzlement, all of it. She was building her own case. My hands shook as I stared at the device that had captured my mother's last days. There's more, Martinez said gently. The last recording on the device was made the night she died, in her car. Play it, I whispered. Chen hesitated. Miss Brennan, it's disturbing. Play it. She pressed a button and my mother's voice filled the room. 20 years vanished in an instant. Testing. This is Claire Brennan, October 15th, 7:43 p.m. I'm driving to meet with FBI agent Morrison regarding my husband's financial crimes. The sound of rain on windshield wipers squeaking rhythmically. I've just left the house where Richard begged me to reconsider. He actually cried. I haven't seen him cry since our wedding day, but tears don't erase theft. They don't undo affairs with his secretary, that paralegal God knows who else. A horn honking in the background. He's following me. Of course he is. Richard Brennan always has to have the last word. The sound of a phone ringing. Old school ringtone. That's him calling again, 16 times since I left. I'm not answering. I'm done talking. Tomorrow, Norma and I start fresh. She doesn't need a father who... A loud thump. My mother's gasp. The sound of tires squealing. What the hell, he just hit me. Richard just... Another impact, harder. The sound of metal on metal. Oh God, he's trying to run me off the road. Richard, stop. Terror in her voice now. My hands clenched the table edge. More impacts, my mother crying. Then the horrible sound of tires losing purchase sliding, her scream, the crunch of metal and breaking glass. Then silence except for the rain. Chen stopped the recording. The conference room was tomb quiet. The recorder was found in the wreckage, she said softly, still in her purse. The investigator logged it, but apparently never checked if it contained anything. It's been in evidence storage for 20 years. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. My father hadn't just watched my mother die. He'd caused it. He'd literally driven her off the road. This is murder, Martinez said. Vehicular homicide at minimum, possibly first degree if we can prove intent. But he's already in custody for the financial crimes, I managed to say. Those were federal charges, Chen explained. This is state jurisdiction. Your father will face additional charges for your mother's murder. Murder, the word I'd wondered about for 2 decades, finally confirmed. There's something else. Chen continued, pulling out my mother's diary. Your mother wrote about her plans for you. She was going to take you to her sister in Oregon, start over. She'd already enrolled you in school there. I took the diary with trembling hands, finding the marked page. October 14th. Tomorrow. I tell the FBI everything. Richard thinks his threats scare me, but I'm done being scared. I'm done watching him destroy everything good. Norma needs a chance at a real life away from his poison. She's already showing signs of anxiety, pulling away from everyone. She knows something's wrong even if she doesn't understand what. My brave girl trying so hard to make everyone happy. After tomorrow, she won't have to pretend anymore. We'll be free. Tears I'd held back for 20 years finally fell. My mother had been trying to save me. She died trying to save me. I'm sorry, Chen said quietly. I know this is difficult, but with this evidence, we can ensure your father pays for all his crimes. Will it be public? I asked. The recording. Chen and Martinez exchanged glances. The trial will be public. The evidence will be presented. I won't lie to you. It's going to be brutal. Oh, good, I said, surprising them. Let everyone hear it. Let them all know what kind of man Richard Brennan really is. Ms. Brennan, Martinez leaned forward. I need to ask, did you know any of this when you planned last night's confrontation? No, I said firmly. I suspected something about the timing, but this, I never imagined he actually killed her. But you wanted the truth to come out. I wanted the financial crimes exposed. Everything else, I gestured helplessly. I just wanted to be free of them. Chen nodded. You may have done more than that. Your actions last night prompted your father's panic, which led to the storage unit, which gave us murder evidence we'd never have found otherwise. So I helped solve my mother's murder. In a way, yes. Chen's expression softened slightly. Your mother would be proud. You finished what she started. I sat with that thought, holding my mother's diary. She'd been brave, facing down a dangerous man to protect me. 20 years later, I'd found my own courage. What happens now? I asked. We'll file additional charges this afternoon. Your father will be transferred to state custody. The federal and state prosecutors will coordinate their cases. Chen paused. You'll need to testify in both trials. I know. It won't be easy. His lawyers will try to destroy you on the stand. They'll bring up everything. The name tag, the recordings, your supposed mental health issues. They'll paint you as a vindictive daughter out for revenge. Let them, I said. I have truth on my side. Truth doesn't always win in court, Martinez warned. Your father has resources, connections. He'll fight dirty. He's been fighting dirty my whole life, I replied. At least now it's in the open. Chen stood gathering the evidence. We'll be in touch about testimony dates. In the meantime, you might want to consider security. Your father has friends, people who won't appreciate what you've done. I'll be careful. As they prepared to leave, Chen turned back. One more thing, your mother's sister in Oregon. She's still alive. We'll be contacting her about the case, but I thought you should know. You have family out there, real family. After they left, I sat alone in the conference room processing everything. My father was a murderer. My mother had died trying to protect me. And somewhere in Oregon, an aunt I'd never met was about to learn her sister's case had been solved. My phone buzzed. Emma texting from an unknown number. Is it true? Did Dad really kill her? The news was already spreading. By evening, it would be everywhere. The financial scandal had been shocking. The murder would be devastating. I texted back, yes, I'm sorry. Her response came quickly, don't be sorry. We needed to know. I needed to know who I really am. You're not him, it was I typed. You get to choose who you are now. So do you. I stared at those 3 words. So do you. For 28 years, I'd been defined by others. Disappointing daughter, family scapegoat, unstable problem. But Emma was right. With the truth finally exposed, I could choose my own identity. I thought about my mother's last words on that recording, her plans for our future, her dreams of freedom. She'd never gotten to see them realized. But I could. I left the federal building through a back exit, avoiding the reporters still hunting for statements. As I walked to my car, my phone rang again. The caller ID showed a Portland, Oregon area code. Hello. Is this Norma Brennan? The voice was feminine, older, trembling with emotion. Yes. This is Helen Morrison. I was your mother's sister. The FBI just called me. They said you found out what really happened to Claire. My throat tightened. Aunt Helen. Oh, sweetheart, she said, and I could hear her crying. I've wanted to contact you for 20 years, but your father threatened legal action if I tried. He said you were fragile, that contact with me would damage your recovery. Another lie, another theft. He'd stolen my aunt along with everything else. He lied, I said simply, about everything. I know that now. Norma, honey, I know this is sudden, but would you consider visiting? I have photos, letters, things of your mother's I've been saving for you. I'd like that, I said, my own tears falling. I'd like that very much. She loved you so much, Helen said. Even in her last letter, all she talked about was protecting you, giving you a better life. She'd be so proud of how brave you've been. Brave. Everyone kept using that word. But as I stood in the parking lot, finally connecting with family my father had hidden from me, I didn't feel brave. I felt free. The state courthouse was a media circus by the time I arrived for my father's arraignment on murder charges. News vans lined the street. Reporters thrust microphones at anyone who might have a connection to the case. I kept my head down, letting my newly hired security detail clear a path. Inside the courtroom, I took my seat in the gallery, trying to ignore the whispers and stares. The Brennan financial scandal had been big news, but the murder charges had turned it into a national sensation. Oh, no. I turned to find Margaret Stevens, my father's longtime secretary, sliding in beside me. She looked older than her 50-year stress etching new lines around her eyes. Margaret, I'm surprised to see you here. She gave a bitter laugh. Where else would I be? I worked for that man for 15 years. I need to see this for myself. I'm sorry about your job. Don't be, she interrupted. I should have quit years ago. Should have spoken up when I started noticing things. What things? Margaret glanced around, then leaned closer. The FBI contacted me last week after your party revelation. I've been cooperating fully. Turns out I wasn't the only one. Before I could ask more, the bailiff called for order. My father was led in an orange jumpsuit, replacing his expensive suits. He looked smaller, somehow diminished without his armor of authority. His eyes found mine across the courtroom. For a moment, I saw something flicker there. Rage, hurt, maybe even regret. Then his lawyer whispered urgently, and he looked away. The charges were read: first-degree murder, vehicular homicide, leaving the scene of a fatal accident, tampering with evidence, obstruction of justice. Each word, another nail in the coffin of Richard Brennan's reputation. How does your client plead? The judge asked. Not guilty on all charges, his lawyer declared. Expected, but still painful to hear. Even now, facing incontrovertible evidence, he wouldn't admit the truth. After bail was denied, flight risk the prosecutor argued successfully, court was adjourned. As people filed out, Margaret caught my arm. There's something you should know, she said quietly, about who else has been talking to the FBI. She guided me to a quiet corner of the courthouse. Remember Thomas Chen from accounting? He's been documenting irregularities for 3 years. And Jennifer Martinez from HR. She has records of every sexual harassment complaint your father buried. How many? 7 that she knows of. Young associates, paralegals, even clients. Margaret's face hardened. I was one of them early on. He made it clear that resistance meant termination. My stomach churned. Margaret, I'm so sorry. It was 15 years ago, she said briskly. I needed the job, had kids to feed. So I stayed quiet and stayed careful. But I kept records, times, dates, witnesses, just in case. And now, Now I'm testifying in both trials, she smiled grimly. Your father thought loyalty was fear. He's about to learn the difference. As we talked, others approached. Former employees, colleagues who'd suspected wrongdoing but feared speaking out. By the time I left the courthouse, I had a list of 12 people who'd been secretly documenting my father's crimes for years. Why didn't anyone say anything sooner? I asked Margaret as we parted. Because he was Richard Brennan, she said simply. Untouchable, until you touched him. You gave us permission to tell the truth, Norma. Don't underestimate what that means. That evening, I met with 3 more unexpected allies at a coffee shop downtown. James Chen, the law partner who'd spoken up at the party, sat across from me with 2 other senior partners. We've been building a case against Richard for 18 months, James admitted, but we needed concrete evidence, something that would stick. You knew he was stealing. We suspected. Client complaints about missing funds, accounting discrepancies, Richard's increasingly erratic behavior, he sighed. But suspicion isn't proof, and Richard was careful. He had Margaret's predecessor destroying documents, had the IT department head in his pocket. What changed? Marcus, or rather, Agent Martinez, approached us 6 months ago, said the FBI was investigating, asked for cooperation. We've been feeding them information ever since. But you still let him operate, let him steal. The second partner, David Liu, spoke up. The FBI wanted to build an airtight case. If we'd moved too soon, he might have destroyed evidence or fled. We had to wait. Meanwhile, he was trying to have me declared incompetent. We didn't know about that, James said quickly. If we had... Norma, not all of us are monsters. Some of us genuinely thought you'd refused your inheritance. Richard was convincing. He always was, I agreed. The firm is finished. The third partner, Susan Walsh, said bluntly, even if we survive the lawsuits, no client will trust us again. 40 years of reputation destroyed. I'm sorry, I said, though I wasn't sure I meant it. Don't be, Susan replied. We enabled him. Maybe not actively, but through silence, through choosing not to look too closely. We're complicit. James pulled out a folder. There is one thing we can do. The firm's dissolution will take months, but we're setting aside funds for victim compensation. Your mother's trust fund, the money Richard stole, we want to make it right. I stared at the documents. A check for $500,000 drawn on the firm's account. This isn't charity, David added quickly. It's restitution, what you were owed plus 20 years of interest. I don't know what to say. Why, say you'll use it better than your father would have, Susan said. Build something clean with it. I took the check with trembling hands. After 20 years of struggle, my mother's gift had finally reached me. As we prepared to leave, James paused. There's going to be a memorial for your mother. Some of us remember Claire. She was brilliant kind. She deserved better than Richard. She deserved the truth, I said. Now she has it. Over the following days, more allies emerged. The FBI revealed that 3 federal judges had been monitoring my father's activities for years, concerned about irregularities in cases he'd argued. 2 state senators called for investigations into broader corruption in the legal community. Even some of Patricia's country club friends reached out admitting they'd always sensed something wrong in the Brennan household but hadn't known how to help. But the most unexpected ally came forward the day before the federal trial was set to begin. I was in my apartment preparing my testimony when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Emma standing in the hallway, looking nothing like the polished professional from the party. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. "Can I come in?" she asked when I opened the door. I let her in, watching as she took in my modest apartment. No designer furniture, no expensive art, just a comfortable space I'd made my own. "It's nice," she said, seeming surprised. "Homey." What do you want, Emma?" She sat on my second-hand couch, pulling out a thick folder. "I've been going through Dad's home office. The FBI missed some things. Hidden compartments, false bottoms in drawers. Dad was paranoid. And I found these." She handed me the folder. Inside were photographs, my mother and me, dozens of them, all from before her death. Pictures I'd thought Patricia had destroyed. He kept them, I whispered, touching a photo of my mother pushing me on a swing, hidden in his private safe, along with these. More documents. My childhood report cards, art projects, a Mother's Day card I'd made in second grade. I don't understand. Why keep these if he hated me? Emma was quiet for a moment. I don't think he hated you. I think he hated himself, and you reminded him why. I looked at her sharply. Since when do you defend him? I'm not defending him, she said quickly. What he did was monstrous, but I've been thinking about what you said. About us being tools and inconveniences, not daughters. Maybe that's true. Or maybe he was just too broken to love anyone properly. That's not an excuse. No, Emma agreed. It's not, which is why I'm here. She pulled out another document. I'm testifying for the prosecution in both trials. I stared at her. Emma, I know things, she continued. Conversations I overheard, documents he had me file without reading. I was his perfect little princess, remember? He trusted me with secrets he'd never share with you. This will destroy any relationship you have left with him. Emma laughed, but it was hollow. What relationship? He was going to let me take the fall for his crimes. He used me just like he used you. I was just too stupid to see it. You weren't stupid. You were a child who trusted her parents. So were you, Emma pointed out. The difference is, I had 20 years of believing I was special while you knew the truth. Maybe that makes you the lucky one. Lucky isn't the word I'd use. No, I suppose not. She stood to leave, then paused. Norma, after this is over, after the trials and the sentencing, do you think we could try to be sisters, I mean? Real sisters, not whatever we were before. I looked at her, really looked at her. Without the designer clothes and perfect makeup, she looked young, vulnerable, lost. I'd like that, I said honestly, but it won't be easy. 20 years of damage doesn't disappear overnight. I know, but maybe we could start with coffee once a week, just to talk. Coffee sounds good. After she left, I sat surrounded by photographs of a life I'd almost forgotten. My mother smiling at the camera, me gap-toothed and giggling, a family that had existed before the lies took over. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Chen. Trial starts tomorrow. Are you ready? Was I ready to face my father in court, to testify about 20 years of abuse, to relive my mother's death through evidence and cross-examination? I looked at the photo in my hand, my mother and me at the beach building sandcastles. She'd been brave enough to stand up to him, to try to protect me even at the cost of her life. I texted back, yes, I'm ready. Tomorrow the truth would have its day in court, and an army of allies, former employees, cheated clients, federal agents, even my own sister, would stand with me. Richard Brennan had spent 20 years building his empire on fear and lies. He was about to learn what happened when the fearful found their courage and the liars faced the truth. The federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan was a fortress of marble and metal designed to intimidate. As I walked through security on the first day of trial, I felt the weight of 20 years pressing down on me. This was it, the moment when all the secrets would be dragged into the light. The courtroom was packed. Media, legal observers, former clients, curious onlookers, all here to witness the fall of Richard Brennan. I took my seat in the witness section, nodding to the other prosecution witnesses. Margaret was there along with James Chen and several former employees. Emma sat 2 rows behind me, studiously avoiding eye contact with Patricia, who'd claimed a spot on the defense side despite everything. My father entered in shackles, the sound of chains accompanying his shuffle to the defense table. He'd aged years in the weeks since his arrest, his hair more gray than silver. Now his shoulders curved inward as if carrying invisible weight. When our eyes met, I saw something I'd never seen before: fear. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Sarah Martinez, laid out the case methodically. 20 years of embezzlement, millions stolen from client trust funds, a pattern of fraud so extensive it had required its own task force to unravel. Richard Brennan built his success on a foundation of lies, she told the jury. He stole from the elderly, from widows, from charities. He betrayed every principle of legal ethics, every bond of trust, and when his own daughter threatened to expose him, he tried to have her declared incompetent rather than face accountability. The defense attorney predictably painted a different picture. Accounting errors, misunderstandings, a successful man brought down by a vindictive daughter with mental health issues. Norma Brennan has admitted to secretly recording her family for years, he argued. She orchestrated a public humiliation at her father's birthday party. She's driven by revenge, not justice. Can we really trust anything she says? When they called me to testify, my legs felt liquid. 28 years of conditioning screamed at me to protect the family name, to minimize, to deflect. But I thought of my mother's voice on that recording, her bravery in the face of death, and found my strength. State your name for the record. Norma Claire Brennan. Ms. Brennan, what is your relationship to the defendant? I looked directly at my father. He's my biological father, though he spent 20 years trying to erase that fact. For 3 hours I testified about discovering the missing trust fund, about the attempts to have me declared incompetent, about years of systematic emotional abuse designed to break me down, make me disappear. Did you conspire to destroy your father? The prosecutor asked. No, I said firmly. I conspired to survive him. There's a difference. The cross-examination was brutal. The defense attorney attacked my credibility, my motives, my mental state. He brought up every perceived failure, every moment of weakness, every time I desperately sought my father's approval. Isn't it true you were fired from your first job out of college? Yes, I was struggling with depression after years of family rejection. You've been in therapy? Yes, to deal with the trauma of being labeled the disappointment by my own father. You illegally recorded private conversations. Illegally recorded conversations I was party to, plus inadvertent recordings from a baby monitor Patricia insisted on installing. Back and forth we went, him trying to paint me as unstable and vindictive, me holding to the truth even when it hurt. You hated your father, didn't you? I paused, really considering the question. No, I hated what he did. I hated who he chose to be. But I never stopped hoping he'd choose differently. Even at that birthday party wearing that cruel name tag, part of me hoped he'd surprise me, choose love over cruelty just once. But he didn't. No, he chose to mock me in his speech, to use his own birthday as another opportunity to humiliate me. That's when I knew hope was just another trap. When I finally stepped down exhausted and raw, Margaret squeezed my hand. You did good, she whispered. Your mother would be proud. The trial continued for 2 weeks. Witness after witness revealed the scope of my father's crimes. Marcus, Agent Martinez, testified about the elaborate shell companies used to hide stolen funds. Forensic accountants detailed the money trail. Former clients wept as they described losing their life savings. Emma's testimony was devastating. She brought documents our father had hidden, revealed conversations where he'd explicitly discussed framing others for his crimes. When the defense tried to discredit her as another vengeful family member, she remained calm. I'm not here for vengeance, she stated. I'm here because the man who raised me is a criminal who was willing to sacrifice anyone, including his own daughters, to maintain his lifestyle. The jury deserves to know that. But the most dramatic moment came when Patricia took the stand. She'd been called as a defense witness, but her testimony went off script almost immediately. He destroyed everything, she said, ignoring her lawyer's attempts to redirect her. My marriage, my reputation, my relationship with my sister. I gave him 20 years and he repaid me with lies and betrayal. Mrs. Brennan, The defense attorney said desperately, "Please answer the question asked." The question? Patricia laughed bitterly. The question is how I was so stupid, how I helped him destroy a motherless child for money, how I became someone my own sister could betray me with. She looked at me, then mascara running down her face. "I'm sorry, Norma. I know it means nothing now, but I'm sorry. We stole your inheritance. We stole your father. We stole your childhood. And for what? For a man who cared about no one but himself." The judge called for order as Patricia broke down completely, but the damage was done. The defense's own witness had confirmed everything. When the verdict came, it was unanimous on all counts. Guilty of wire fraud, guilty of embezzlement, guilty of money laundering. The list went on for 47 counts total. As they led him away to await sentencing, my father looked at me one last time. His lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear over the courtroom noise. Later, Emma told me what he'd said. "I'm proud of you." Too little too late, 20 years too late. The state murder trial began a month later. This time, I sat with Aunt Helen, who'd flown in from Oregon. She held my hand as they played my mother's final recording as the prosecutor detailed how my father had deliberately run her off the road. "He didn't mean to kill her," the defense argued. "It was road rage, a moment of passion, manslaughter at most." But the prosecution had done their homework. They'd found witnesses who'd seen my father drinking heavily that night, security footage from a gas station showing him following my mother, cell tower data proving he'd chased her for miles. "This wasn't a moment of passion," the prosecutor declared. "This was a sustained pursuit ending in murder. Claire Brennan was fleeing her abusive husband and he killed her for it." When the guilty verdict came, second-degree murder, I didn't feel joy, just hollow relief. Justice 20 years delayed felt less like victory and more like exhaustion. At sentencing, both federal and state victims were allowed to speak. Client after client described lives ruined, retirements, destroyed dreams, shattered. Emma spoke about losing her father twice, once to his crimes, again to the truth. Patricia, broken and heading for her own bankruptcy, talked about choosing greed over compassion and paying the price. When my turn came, I'd prepared a speech about forgiveness and moving forward. But standing there, looking at the man who'd killed my mother and tried to destroy me, different words came. "You taught me about the law," I said, "about justice and truth and consequences, but you taught me backward, by showing me injustice, lies, and evasion. You made me strong by trying to break me. You made me successful by calling me a failure. You gave me purpose by giving me something to fight against." I paused, meeting his eyes. "So thank you, Dad. Thank you for being such a perfect example of who not to become. Because of you, I know exactly who I am. I'm Claire's daughter. I'm a survivor. I'm the truth you couldn't bury. And despite everything, I don't hate you. I pity you. You had everything. Talent, success, a family who loved you, and you threw it all away for money and pride. That's not tragedy. That's just waste." The judge sentenced him to 25 years federal, 20 years state to run concurrently. At 60, it was effectively a life sentence. As they led him away, for the last time, he didn't look back. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. "How does it feel?" they shouted. "What's next for you?" I thought about the question. My father was going to prison. My mother's murder was solved. The inheritance I'd been denied had been restored, along with additional damages from the firm's dissolution. Emma and I were slowly building a relationship. Aunt Helen had invited me to spend Christmas in Oregon with cousins I'd never met. "What's next?" I repeated. "Life, my life, finally." As I walked away from the courthouse, away from the cameras and the questions, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Coffee tomorrow, usual place here." I smiled, texting back, "See you at 9. The disappointment had become something else entirely, not through revenge or vindication, but through truth. And truth, as my father had taught me in his twisted way, really did set you free. The sound of my heels clicking against the courthouse marble felt different this time. Final. I'd worn my best dress. Not designer, but mine bought with money I'd earned honestly. The halls were still crowded with reporters and observers, but I walked through them like they were ghosts. After everything, they seemed insubstantial, temporary. Ms. Brennan, one more question. Norma, how does justice feel? Will you write a book about your experience? I paused at the courthouse doors, looking back at the eager faces the microphones thrust forward like weapons. For a moment, I considered answering, giving them the soundbite they craved. Instead, I smiled. A real smile, not the desperate please love me grimace I'd worn for 20 years. No comment, I said simply and pushed through the doors into the afternoon sun. The September air was crisp, carrying hints of autumn. I'd parked 3 blocks away to avoid the worst of the media circus, and I savored the walk. Each step carried me further from the courthouse, from my father, from the life I'd been trapped in for so long. My phone buzzed constantly. Reporters, distant relatives, suddenly interested in reconnecting old classmates who'd ignored me for years. I silenced it. Today wasn't about them. As I reached the corner where I'd parked, a familiar figure stepped out from a coffee shop. Emma, dressed simply in jeans and a Columbia Law sweatshirt holding 2 cups. Thought you might need this, she said, offering me one. I accepted it gratefully. How did you know where I'd parked? Same place I did, she said, gesturing to her own car next to mine. 3 blocks away, side street, avoid the cameras. We're more alike than either of us wanted to admit. We stood there, sisters who were still strangers, sipping coffee while the city rushed around us. So it's really over, Emma said finally. The trials are. The rest? I shrugged. That's just beginning. I got a job, she said suddenly. Legal aid, helping people who can't afford lawyers. The pay is terrible, the hours are worse, but it's honest. Yeah, she smiled, and for the first time it reached her eyes. It feels good. Scary as hell, but good. I'm proud of you. Emma's eyes misted. You know, that's the first time anyone said that to me about something I actually earned. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment before she asked, What about you? What's next? I'd been thinking about that question for weeks. Aunt Helen offered me a job in Portland. Her husband runs a forensic accounting firm. Smaller than what I'm doing here, but away from all this. Yeah. You should go, Emma said immediately. Get out of here, start fresh, you've earned it. What about us, I asked. We just started building something. Emma smiled sadly. Maybe that's exactly why you should go. We need time to become ourselves without all this weight. I'll still be here when you're ready, if you want. I'll want, I said firmly. You're the only family I have left. That's not true, Emma corrected. You have Aunt Helen. You have cousins in Oregon. You have choices now. Choices. Such a simple word for something I'd never really had before. A commotion down the street caught our attention. Reporters had spotted us were heading our way en masse. Go, Emma said urgently. I'll handle them. Emma. Go, she repeated. Let me do this one thing right. Let me protect my sister for once. I squeezed her hand, then got in my car. As I drove away, I saw Emma in my rearview mirror, standing firm as the reporters surrounded her, giving me time to escape. 20 minutes later, I was back in my apartment packing. Not everything, just essentials. Aunt Helen had said I could stay with her while I looked for my own place. Take your time, she'd insisted. 20 years apart is too long. We have catching up to do. As I folded clothes into my suitcase, I found the name tag from my father's party. The disappointment. I'd kept it, though I wasn't sure why. Evidence, reminder, fuel for anger. Now I held it up to the light, this small piece of cruelty that had started everything. Without thinking, I walked to my kitchen, found matches, and held it over the sink. The flame caught quickly, consuming the words, reducing them to ash. I washed the remains down the drain, let the city's sewage system have the last of Richard Brennan's labels. My phone rang. Aunt Helen. Hi, sweetheart, I saw the news. Are you okay? I'm good, I said, surprising myself by meaning it. I'm packing now. I can probably be there by tomorrow night if I drive straight through. Don't rush. Take your time. Stop somewhere nice for the night. You deserve rest. Deserve. Another word I was learning to understand differently. Aunt Helen, tell me about her, about Mom, the real her, not the saint I've built in my head. My aunt's voice warmed. Oh, honey, she was no saint. Claire had a temper like thunder and a laugh like sunshine. She couldn't cook to save her life, but insisted on trying. She sang off-key in the shower and cried at dog food commercials. She was brilliant and flawed and absolutely devoted to you. I barely remember her anymore, just fragments. Then I'll help you remember. I have home videos, photo albums, her journals from high school. We'll piece her back together, you and I. The real woman, not the victim she became. After we hung up, I continued packing. The apartment looked strange, half empty, but I'd leave the furniture for the next tenant. Let someone else build a life with these pieces. I was ready for my own. A knock at the door interrupted me. I checked the peephole, surprised to see Harold Westbrook standing in my hallway. Harold, I'm sorry to intrude, he said when I opened the door. I heard you were leaving town. News travels fast. May I... He gestured inside and I let him in. He looked around my simple space with something like approval. I owe you an apology, he said without preamble. I knew something was wrong with your trust fund story. Richard's explanation never quite added up, but I chose to believe it because it was easier than confronting him. You weren't the only one. No, but I'd known your mother. I was at your parents' wedding. I held you when you were a baby. His voice cracked. I failed you, Norma. We all did. I don't need apologies anymore, Harold. No, but you deserve them. And this. He pulled out an envelope. It's not much, but some of us, the partners who remember Claire, we wanted you to have something beyond the legal settlement. Call it conscience money if you want, but... I opened the envelope. A check for $50,000 signed by 7 names I recognized from my childhood. My mother's colleagues finally trying to make amends. I can't accept this. You can and you will, Harold said firmly. Use it to build something good, something Claire would be proud of. After he left, I sat among my half-packed belongings, overwhelmed. For 28 years I'd been fighting alone. Now, in victory, allies appeared everywhere, some seeking absolution, others offering support, all acknowledging truths they'd been too cowardly to face before. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. Heard you're leaving. Good. This city has too many ghosts. Find somewhere they can't reach you. Another from James Chen. The firm's dissolution is final. Your mother's old office contents were in storage, shipping them to your aunt's address. Even Patricia had sent a message through her lawyer. I know you'll never forgive me. I'll never forgive myself. Be happy, Norma. Someone should be. As evening fell, I loaded my car. 1 suitcase of clothes, 1 box of important papers, 1 small collection of photos Emma had returned to me. My entire life fit in a Honda Civic with room to spare. I did a final walkthrough of the apartment. 5 years I'd lived here, scraping by, building my business, crying into cheap wine when the loneliness got too heavy. Now it looked like what it had always been, a hiding place, not a home. I left the keys with the building manager and drove toward the highway. In my rearview mirror, the city lights glittered like false promises. Somewhere in that maze of concrete and ambition, my father sat in a federal holding cell. Patricia was moving in with her sister. Not Jessica, who'd fled to Europe, but an older sister who'd taken pity. Emma was probably in her empty apartment, learning who she was without money or expectations. And I was driving west toward an aunt who'd waited 20 years to know me, toward cousins who might become family, toward a life I'd choose instead of one chosen for me. At the city limits, I pulled over one last time. The GPS showed 847 miles to Portland, 2 days of driving toward something instead of away from it. I thought about my mother making her own escape 20 years ago, never reaching her destination. "I'm finishing the trip, Mom," I whispered to the empty car. "The one you started. I'm getting us both out." Then I merged onto the interstate and drove into the darkness, leaving the disappointment behind and carrying only Norma, whoever she might become. The December rain drummed against the windows of Morrison and Associates Forensic Accounting, a soothing rhythm I'd grown to love. Portland rain was different from New York rain. Gentler, more constant, like the city itself was washing away the past one drop at a time. "Norma, your 3 o'clock is here," Ben called from reception. Ben was Aunt Helen's husband, a gentle bear of a man who'd welcomed me without question or judgment. I looked up from the embezzlement case I'd been analyzing. A small business owner suspicious of his partner. Clean, straightforward work. No family drama, no generational theft, just numbers that told simple truths. "Send them in," I called back, saving my work. But it wasn't a client who walked through my door. It was Emma, rain-soaked and nervous, clutching a manila envelope like a lifeline. I stood shocked. "What are you doing here? Can we talk?" She was shivering from cold or nerves, I couldn't tell. I took the red eye. I know I should have called, but... "Sit," I said, grabbing a towel from my gym bag. "You're soaked." She accepted it gratefully, drying her hair while I made tea on the small hot plate I'd installed. We hadn't spoken much since I'd left New York. A few texts, one awkward phone call. The distance had been necessary, but painful. "How did you find me?" I asked, handing her a mug. "Aunt Helen. She said you'd be here." Emma looked around my small office, taking in the diplomas on the wall, my own not inherited, the photos on my desk. Aunt Helen and me at Thanksgiving cousins, I was getting to know one old photo of my mother. It's nice. Peaceful. "It is." I sat across from her waiting. Emma had come 3,000 miles for a reason. She set down the tea and opened the envelope, pulling out a thick stack of papers. "I've been going through things. Dad's storage units, safety deposit boxes the FBI didn't know about. I found these." I accepted the papers, frowning at the top sheet. It was a bank statement from 23 years ago, my mother's name at the top. "Look at the deposits," Emma urged. I scanned the entries, then froze. Regular deposits of $50,000, sometimes more. The memo lines were encoded, but the pattern was familiar. "These are bribes," Emma finished, "or payoffs, whatever you want to call them. Mom was taking money to influence Dad's cases, criminal cases where verdicts mysteriously went the defendant's way." I set the papers down carefully, my hands shaking. "You're saying my mother was corrupt?" "No," Emma said quickly. "Keep reading. Look at where the money went." I flipped through more statements. Every dollar that came in went out just as quickly. Donations to women's shelters, anonymous payments to legal aid societies, college funds for children whose parents were in prison. "She was redistributing it," I said slowly. "She found out what Dad was doing and couldn't stop him directly. He was too powerful even then. So she did this, took the dirty money and cleaned it by giving it away." I found a letter in my mother's handwriting tucked between statements. "If something happens to me, know that I tried. I couldn't fix Richard, couldn't make him the man I thought I'd married, but I could balance the scales a little. Every dollar he took in blood money I sent, where it might do good. It wasn't enough. It will never be enough. But it was something. Tell Norma I loved her more than words can say. Tell her to be better than both of us." Tears blurred my vision. Even trapped in a marriage to a corrupt man, my mother had fought back in the only way she could. "There's more," Emma said gently. "Dad knew. He found out about a week before she died. That's what their final fight was really about. Not just his affairs or embezzlement, but her secret rebellion. It gave him even more motive to kill her," I said numbly. "Yes, but Norma, don't you see what this means? She wasn't just a victim. She was a hero working in the shadows, saving who she could. You come from that, not from him, from her." I held the letter, this last gift from beyond the grave. My mother imperfect, but trying, trapped, but fighting. Like me. Like Emma now. Why bring this to me, I asked. You could have mailed it. Emma fidgeted with her empty mug. Because I have a proposition. I've been working legal aid, but it's not enough. The system is broken, and the people who need help most can't afford it. So I'm starting something new. A foundation that provides free forensic accounting services to people who've been defrauded. Employees with wage theft cases. Elderly people scammed out of retirement. Divorcing spouses whose partners hid assets. Emma, I know it's crazy. I have no money, no backing, but I have a law degree and a famous name that opens doors even if they're usually slamming in my face after. She laughed shakily. I thought maybe, if you were interested. You want me to come back to New York? No, she said quickly. I want to come here. Start fresh where the Brennan name means nothing, where we can build something clean. I stared at her, this sister I'd never really known. 3 months ago, she'd been the golden child in designer clothes. Now she sat in my office in jeans and a thrift store sweater proposing we save the world together. I can't pay you, she continued. Not at first, but I've been talking to some of Dad's former clients, the ones he didn't steal from. A few are willing to provide seed funding. They like the poetry of it, Richard Brennan's daughters using their skills to fight financial crime. You've really thought this through. It's all I've thought about for months. Well, that, and whether you'd ever forgive me. Whether we could ever be real sisters instead of strangers who share DNA. I looked at the papers spread across my desk, evidence of my mother's secret war, proof that even in the darkest circumstances people could choose light. We'd need a name, I said slowly, for the foundation. Emma's face lit up. You mean the Claire Brennan Foundation for Financial Justice, I suggested. Let them both be remembered properly. Her for who she really was, him as a cautionary tale. Emma was crying now, not bothering to hide it. Yes, God, yes, that's perfect. It won't be easy, I warned. Starting a non-profit, working together after everything. Nothing about our lives has been easy, Emma pointed out. At least this would be difficult for a good reason. I stood and walked to my window, looking out at the Portland rain. 3 months ago, I'd run here to hide, to heal, to figure out who I was, without the weight of being Richard Brennan's disappointment. I'd found peace, family purpose. But maybe hiding wasn't the end goal. Maybe it was just preparation for something bigger. We'll need office space, I said, and a business plan, and about 1,000 other things I haven't thought of yet. Is that a yes? I turned back to Emma, my sister, my former enemy, my possible future partner. That's a let's talk to Aunt Helen and see what she thinks. She's the wisest person I know. She said you'd say that, Emma grinned. She also said to tell you she's already clearing out the spare room for me, and Ben's excited to have another lawyer in the family to argue with. You already talked to them. I may have called from the airport, just to make sure I wouldn't be shot on sight. I laughed, surprising myself. You're different, Emma, stronger. Rock bottom has a way of teaching you who you are, she said. Turns out I'm not Patricia's puppet or Dad's princess. I'm someone who wants to matter, to help to balance the scales Mom started tipping. That evening, we had dinner at Aunt Helen's. Salmon and stories, memories served with wine. Helen told us about our mother, the activist, the woman who'd chained herself to courthouse steps to protest unfair sentencing, who'd provided free accounting services to battered women, hiding assets from abusive husbands. She'd be so proud, Helen said, raising her glass. Both of you choosing justice over comfort. That's Claire's true legacy. Later, Emma and I walked through the Pearl District umbrella-less in the gentle rain. I've been seeing someone, Emma said suddenly, a public defender, makes even less money than I do. And Mom would hate him. Dad would consider him beneath notice. But he makes me laugh, and he thinks my last name is unfortunate, but not definitional. Sounds perfect. He is perfectly imperfect, like everything in my new life. She paused under a streetlight. I'm happy, Norma. Broke uncertain, a little scared, but happy. Is that crazy? No, I said, thinking of my own life. Small apartment, meaningful work, weekly dinners with family who actually wanted me there. That's what freedom feels like. We walked on in comfortable silence, sisters finally planning a foundation that would honor our mother and spite our father, that would help strangers the way no one had helped us. My phone buzzed, a text from Margaret back in New York. Saw the news about your father's appeal being denied. 25 years is a long time to think about what he's done. Maybe by the time he gets out, he'll be someone different. I showed it to Emma, who shrugged. Maybe, or maybe not. Either way, it's not our problem anymore. She was right. Richard Brennan's redemption, or lack thereof, was his own journey. We had our own paths to walk, our own choices to make. Want to grab coffee tomorrow? Emma asked as we reached her hotel. Start working on that business plan. The Café Umbria at 9. I agreed. Bring your laptop and your best ideas. Norma, she hesitated at the hotel entrance. Thank you for listening, for considering this, for not throwing me out of your office. Emma, I said gently, we're sisters. Real sisters now. That means second chances and new beginnings. Mom would want that for us. She hugged me, then fierce and sudden, and I hugged back. Two women who'd lost everything and found each other in the ruins. As I walked home through the Portland rain, I thought about disappointment and destiny, about the labels we're given and the ones we choose. My father had named me his disappointment, but I'd become my mother's legacy instead. Emma had been the golden child who turned to lead, then found her own alchemy to become something stronger. Tomorrow, we'd start building something new, the Claire Brennan Foundation for Financial Justice. It had a nice ring to it. My phone rang. Aunt Helen. You okay, sweetheart? Emma seemed hopeful when she left. We're going to try, I said. The foundation, the sister thing, all of it. Good. Your mother always said the best revenge was a life well lived. Seems like you girls are finally figuring out what that means. As I entered my apartment building, I caught my reflection in the glass doors. A woman comfortable in her own skin, carrying her own name without shame or apology. Not the disappointment, not the victim, not even the survivor anymore. Just Norma. It was enough. It was everything. The federal prison visiting room was sterile and cold, all metal tables and plastic chairs bolted to the floor. I'd driven 2 days from Portland to get here through summer thunderstorms and Midwest humidity, questioning my decision the entire way. You sure about this? Emma had asked when I told her. We'd been in our small foundation office surrounded by case files of people we were helping. A widow whose financial advisor had drained her accounts, a small business owner cheated by his partner, a young woman whose ex-husband had hidden assets during their divorce. No, I'd admitted, but he keeps requesting to see me, and I need to know why. Now, sitting in this fluorescent-lit room, I waited. Around me, other families conducted their stilted reunions. Mothers touching sons' hands across tables. Children showing drawings to fathers they barely knew. The sadness of it all was suffocating. When they brought him in, I almost didn't recognize my father. 6 months in federal prison had aged him a decade. His hair was completely gray now, his expensive suits replaced by khaki uniforms, his commanding presence diminished to something almost fragile. He sat across from me, hands folded on the metal table. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. You came, he said finally. You said you had information about Mom, the truth. A bitter smile crossed his face. The truth. You always did love the truth, didn't you, even as a little girl? But why Daddy? You drove me crazy with that question. And you drove me crazy with lies. Yes, he agreed simply. I did. The easy admission threw me. I'd expected denials. Justifications, the usual Richard Brennan show. This quiet acknowledgement was unsettling. Why did you want to see me? I asked. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, do you know what I do all day in here? I don't particularly care. I think he continued as if I hadn't spoken. No clients to charm, no deals to make, no scandals to cover. Just time and memory. It's its own kind of torture for someone like me. Am I supposed to feel sorry for you? No. He met my eyes. You're supposed to hear the truth. The one you came for. About that night. I tensed. Patricia told me. You followed Mom, fought with her, ran her off the road. Patricia told you her version. She always did like drama. He shifted in his uncomfortable chair. The truth is worse and better than what you think. Meaning, I did follow Claire that night. I was drunk, angry, desperate. She'd found out everything. Not just the affairs and the stealing, but what I'd let myself become. She looked at me like I was a stranger wearing her husband's face. He paused, lost in memory. I caught up to her at a red light on Riverside Drive, begged through her window to come home to let us talk. She laughed, not cruel, just tired. Said I could talk to her lawyer like a civilized person. And then she drove away, and I followed, not chasing, just following, like maybe if I stayed close enough she'd change her mind. His hands clenched on the table. She pulled over about 5 miles from where she crashed, told me to stop embarrassing myself, that Norma didn't need to see her father acting like a pathetic stalker. Don't use me as... Let me finish, he said sharply, a flash of the old Richard, then softer. Please, let me finish. I nodded tightly. I told her about the money, all of it, how deep I was and how many people I'd stolen from. I thought if she understood the pressure I was under, she'd forgive me. Instead, she said she already knew, had known for months, had been documenting everything. The recordings. Among other things, your mother was brilliant, Norma, smarter than me in every way that mattered. She'd built a case that would have destroyed me completely. He laughed bitterly. 20 years later, you did the same thing. Genetics, I suppose. Get to the point. The point is, she gave me a choice that night. Turn myself in, make restitution, get help for what she called my addiction to winning at any cost. Or she'd do it for me. And you chose to kill her instead. I chose to keep following her. His voice dropped. She was upset when she drove away, crying. I know because I made her cry. She took that curve too fast in the rain with tears blurring her vision and 20 years of marriage falling apart in her rearview mirror. You're saying it really was an accident? I'm saying I killed her as surely as if I'd cut her brake lines, but not the way you think. I killed her with betrayal, with the weight of who I'd become. She died running from a monster she'd once loved. The words hung between us heavy with 2 decades of guilt. The paint transfer on her car, I said, the investigator said, was from where I nudged her at the last light, trying to get her to pull over again. Not hard enough to cause damage, just contact. Stupid, desperate. He rubbed his face. I was right behind her when she went over. Watched it happen in slow motion. Called 911, tried to climb down to help, but it was too late. She was gone by the time they pulled her out. The last thing she ever said to me was, "Go home, Richard. Norma needs at least one parent who isn't a complete disappointment." The word hit like a physical blow. She said that... Ironic, isn't it? She worried about you having a disappointing parent. Instead, you got me, and I made disappointment your actual name. Why, bursary the question I'd wanted to ask for 20 years. Why did you hate me so much? I didn't hate you. He looked older as he said it. I hated me. Every time I looked at you, I saw her eyes, saw her goodness, saw the moment her car went over that edge. You were my guilt made flesh, my failure walking around in miniature. So you punished me for existing. I pushed you away before you could see what I really was. Except you saw anyway, didn't you? Watched and waited and documented, just like your mother. Someone had to. Yes, he agreed. Someone did, and I'm glad it was you. I stared at him. You're glad I destroyed your life. My life was already destroyed, Norma. Had been since the night Claire died. Everything after was just momentum. Building bigger lies to cover smaller ones, stealing more to hide what I'd already taken. You didn't destroy me. You stopped me. Is that supposed to be an apology? No, there's no apology big enough for what I did to you, to Emma, to everyone I hurt. He leaned back in his chair. But there is something I can give you. I don't want anything from you. Not even your mother's real last words. I froze. You said... I lied. Even then, even with her dying, I lied. His voice was hollow. Her actual last words, the ones I heard before the car went over. Tell Norma I love her. Tell her every day. Promise me, Richard. The tears came then, 20 years of them flooding out in this sterile room while my father watched with eyes that finally showed real emotion. I broke that promise, he said quietly, broke every promise I ever made to her. But you should know that in her last moments, she thought of you. Only you, not my betrayal, not her pain, just making sure you knew you were loved. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe past the grief and rage and unexpected gratitude for these words I'd needed my whole life. I've made arrangements, he continued. There was a life insurance policy Patricia didn't know about, one I took out when you were born that I never touched. It's yours now. $2 million. It can't buy back your childhood, but maybe it can help that foundation Emma told me about. Emma visits you. Once, to rage at me mostly, but she mentioned what you two are building. Your mother would be so proud. You're doing what she tried to do, balancing the scales. Don't, I said sharply, don't you dare try to claim any part of what we're building. You don't get to be proud. You don't get redemption through our work. I'm not looking for redemption, he said. 25 years isn't enough to pay for what I've done, but I can acknowledge what you've become despite me, or maybe because of me. Either way, you won. This was never about winning. No, he agreed. For you, it was about truth. And now you have it. All of it. The question is, what will you do with it? I stood suddenly desperate to leave this place, this conversation, this man who'd shaped my life through cruelty and absence. Norma, he called as I reached the door, I know you'll never forgive me. I'll never forgive myself. But for what it's worth, you were never the disappointment. I was. I always was. I looked back at him one last time, this broken man in his prison khakis, stripped of power and pretense, left with nothing but truth and time. I know, I said simply. I've always known. Then I left, walking out of that prison and into the bright summer day. My phone already had texts from Emma, from Aunt Helen, from the life I'd built on the ashes of the old one. The drive back to Portland would be long, but I didn't mind. I had my mother's last words now. Her love confirmed her faith in me, justified. At my car, I sat for a moment, processing everything. The insurance money would fund our foundation for years. We could help so many people, save so many families from financial predators like my father. It was almost poetic. Richard Brennan's final policy funding the fight against everything he'd represented. I called Emma as I drove away from the prison. How was it? She asked immediately. Hard. Necessary. I'll tell you everything when I get home. Home, she repeated. I like how that sounds. Portland home, not just running away anymore. Yeah, I agreed. Home. Drive safe. We have 3 new cases waiting and a meeting with potential donors on Thursday. I'll be there. Norma, I love you. I know we don't say it enough, but I do. I love you too, Em. After we hung up, I drove in peaceful silence for a while. Then on impulse, I pulled over at a rest stop and found a quiet spot under a tree. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Hi, Mom, I said to the evening air. I know you loved me. I've always known deep down, but it's nice to hear it confirmed. The wind rustled the leaves above me, and for just a moment I could almost feel her presence. Not a ghost, Not a sign, just the sense that love doesn't die even when people do. I'm okay now, I continued. More than okay. I'm helping people like you tried to. I have a real sister in Emma, a wonderful aunt in Helen. I have work that matters and a life I chose. I even have your last words, proof that I was loved. I smiled, remembering her voice from that old recording Agent Chen had played, strong, determined, facing down the man who'd betray her. I think I understand now why you stayed as long as you did. You were trying to save him. But some people don't want to be saved, and that's not our fault. It's not my fault he became what he became. It's not your fault he killed you for trying to hold him accountable. The sunset deepened, and I knew I needed to get back on the road. But there was one more thing to say. I forgive you, Mom, for not being able to protect me, for dying when I needed you, for not being perfect. You were human, and you did your best, and that's all any of us can do. A strange lightness filled me then, like setting down a weight I'd carried so long I'd forgotten I was holding it. 20 years of anger and grief and guilt finally released into the evening air. My phone buzzed. A photo from Emma of our office with a hand-painted sign she'd just hung, the Claire Brennan Foundation for Financial Justice, balancing the scales since 2024. I laughed, actually laughed alone in a rest stop in the middle of nowhere. The disappointment had become something else entirely. The broken child had grown into a woman who helped others. The lies had given way to truth, and the truth had set us all free. I got back in my car and continued west, toward Portland, toward home, toward the life my mother had dreamed of for me. In my rearview mirror, the prison faded into darkness. Ahead, the horizon beckoned with possibility. The story that began with a cruel name tag at a birthday party was ending with love, purpose, and hope. And somewhere in whatever comes after this life, I hoped Claire Brennan was finally at peace, knowing her daughter had found her way home. See you. When 1 year later, the conference room at the Claire Brennan Foundation was packed. Former victims sharing their stories, volunteer lawyers and accountants ready to help reporters documenting our first anniversary. Emma stood at the podium, confident and passionate, explaining our mission. Financial abuse thrives in silence, she said. Our foundation breaks that silence. In 1 year, we've helped recover over $10 million for victims of fraud. We've put 3 perpetrators behind bars. We've given hope to people who thought the system had forgotten them. I watched from the side, proud of this woman my sister had become. The audience, many of them people we'd helped, applauded enthusiastically. But we couldn't do this without my partner, my sister and my hero, Emma continued. Norma Brennan, who turned her own pain into purpose, who showed me that the only way to honor the past is to build a better future. She gestured for me to join her, and I did, standing beside her as cameras flashed. Any words? Emma whispered. I looked out at the crowd. Survivors, fighters, people who'd refused to let financial predators win. In the back, I spotted Aunt Helen, tears of pride streaming down her face. Just one question, I said into the microphone. Who here has been told they're not enough, that their disappointments, that their pain doesn't matter? Most hands went up. Me too, I said simply, but here's what I learned. They were wrong. Every person who tried to diminish you, silence you, steal from you. They were wrong. You matter. Your story matters. And we're here to make sure justice matters too. The room erupted in applause, and Emma squeezed my hand. We stood together, sisters and partners, proof that sometimes the best revenge really is a life well lived. Later, as we cleaned up after the event, Emma asked, "Any regrets?" I thought about it. The father in prison I'd never see again, the childhood lost to lies, the mother whose grave I visited every time I was in New York. No, I said finally. Every step led here, even the painful ones, especially the painful ones. Even the name tag. Especially the name tag, I smiled. It was meant to break me. Instead, it set me free. Emma nodded, understanding perfectly. We'd both been labeled by others disappointment and golden child, failure and success, but we'd torn off those labels and written our own. Outside, Portland rain began to fall, washing the city clean for tomorrow's possibilities. Inside, surrounded by the work that gave our lives meaning, we were already planning the future. The Claire Brennan Foundation for Financial Justice would grow. More victims would find help. More predators would face consequences. And two sisters who'd found each other in the ruins would keep building something beautiful from the ashes. It wasn't the life anyone had planned for us. It was better. It was chosen. It was ours. And in the end, that made all the difference. Thank you for joining me on Norma's journey from disappointment to triumph. If you or someone you know has faced financial abuse or family betrayal, remember your pain is valid, your story matters, and justice is possible. Have you ever had to stand up to a family member who wronged you? How did you find the courage? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about resilience, truth, and the power of choosing your own path. And please share this with anyone who needs to hear that they're not alone in their struggle. Remember, you are not the labels others give you. You are the choices you make and the life you build. Stay strong, seek truth, and never let anyone else write your story. Until next time, keep fighting the good fight.